Hello there, everybody. How's everyone doing? Today is Tuesday, right? God, the days of the week have become quite muddled lately. But anyway, we are here. We are streaming. Let's get this intro out of the way. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to anybody who might be watching this whenever you're watching this. Today is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. My name is Josh, and on this channel, we talk about news, politics, and cover current events. So today, we have a few other right-wing figures that I kind of want to look at. A little bit of a continuation of the coverage that we did yesterday about the Colorado Springs shooting. The reason why I chose the title I did is because, quite frankly, looking at a lot of the reactions from the right wing, it appears that unlike a lot of other times when stuff like these mass shootings would happen, it seems like this time they're doubling down. So there's that. There is a current railroad railroad workers strike that might be happening, which will drastically slowing down our production chain, so that'll be fun. The Republicans are going to be taking over the House of Representatives and wasting everybody's hard-earned tax dollars on nonsense investigations. We live in a bit of a hell world right now, but we'll all get through it together. The end of the day, we keep moving forward. It's kind of all you can do. But anyway, let's take a look. So I want to start out by talking about somebody who I don't really talk about very often, and that's Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, if you're not aware, is the primetime host of the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show on Fox News, the number one rated news broadcasting channel and number one rated show in the U.S. Tucker Carlson we've talked before about the platforms that other figures on the right have, and this one is no different. The only difference really is Tucker Carlson's platform eclipses even that of Matt Walsh, of Chaya Raichik's Libs of TikTok, of Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, of Dennis Prager's PragerU. Tucker Carlson is the premier right-wing commentator in this country. So I want to take a look, because something that the right wing has, and this is always the playbook usually when these sorts of events happen, is there's usually the initial goal, and we saw a little bit of this from Matt Walsh, where he's telling everybody, we shouldn't be talking about this. It's too early to the event happening. We shouldn't be talking about it. We should be shh, don't talk about it. It's that sort of stuff. What comes with that a lot of the times also is a denial of any kind of accountability. Tucker Carlson goes on his program every single night and spreads the same kind of rhetoric that Matt Walsh and Chaya Raichik and those types do, but the biggest difference is that he's legitimized by his platform on Fox News, by his platform in the mainstream media, and by the people that he brings on, who he parades around as legitimate sources. So let's take a look really quickly. We're going to start kind of with what Tucker Carlson was saying about a month ago in regards to drag shows, in regards to LGBT spaces. So that's what we're gonna kind of start with that, because I want you to keep in mind when we're watching this. This is well before this shooting, but this is what Tucker says, and this is what all conservatives say before shootings. And then after that, we'll take a look at his most recent broadcast and what he had to say. The first broadcast he did after the vile shooting that took place on Saturday the 20th. So it was 20th or 19th. Might have been 19th. I always forget. Saturday.
He joins us tonight. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. What did you find in the month you spent looking at this?
Good God, this video player
I found
is
that parents' instincts is largely
trash.
correct. A lot of parents are wondering why, as an adult,
in sexualizing children.
Okay,
and
there we go.
Unfortunately, some people are. What would you do? You might have a drag queen story
Can't see. Oh my God.
hour at a library or a school. That's where you would indoctrinate in sexual story.
There we go. Okay.
At a library or a school.
Sorry guys, the video player for Fox News is as awful as their politics.
Let's say you were interested in sexualizing children, and unfortunately some people are. What would you do? You might have a drag queen story hour at a library or a school. That's where you would indoctrinate and sexualize children. It's happening across the
library or school.
Here's one example from the Aspen Hill.
So understand, a lot of this is always going to be talking about what people who... So a lot of this is going to be about Drag Time Story Hour, which is a pretty innocuous and, quite frankly, uninteresting event that organizations will put together. It's not that interesting. You read kids' books to kids in a silly costume. Big whoop. But to start off, let us note that Tucker always frames these sorts of conflicts between, honestly, regular people and his Christian conservative base as campaigns. Because to him, he starts out all of this with, well, if you want to sexualize children, if you want to groom children, if you, quite frankly, want to rape children, how would you go about it? He explains simply that there is an outcome, and this is how people who want to reach that outcome get to that point. And when he frames that, underneath all of this, keep wondering to yourself, always keep in mind, if he's telling you what their goal is and how they're going about it, what do you think that communicates to the audience? Is an audience member of Tucker Carlson's thinking, well, I want this outcome. What do I need to do to now prevent that outcome? So always keep that in mind.
A library in Rockville, Maryland this summer.
I am a drag queen, female impersonator.
Notice completely closed.
This is if you're a drag queen and you know it. If you're a drag queen and you know it, strike a pose.
Wearing a hat, wearing long boots, wearing a shirt.
Shake your bum. If you're a drag queen and you know it, shake your bum. If you're a drag queen and you know it, and you really want to show it, if you're a drag queen and you know it, shake your bum.
Whoa.
Woo.
So the deal always was, do what you want, just leave the kids out of it.
Now, I'm not sure if, maybe there are some more prudish people watching this, but did anybody else think that was wildly sexual? If you watched that, did you find anything sexual about that? If you did, I really do have to wonder about where your inclinations are a little bit. Because if you've ever listened or really ever been to summer camps, daycares, any sort of normal childcare event, which, by the way, I used to work summer camps back in Virginia when I was like 13, I think, like for for the summer because my mom wanted me to have a job instead of going out and goofing off in the neighborhood. This is kind of how kids act. They goof off, they dance around, they kind of live by the seat of their pants. It's really not all that I can sit here and say it's really not all that worth getting worked up about, but clearly to Tucker Carlson and to his audience, there is something more nefarious here.
Because child molestation is a crime. But they're not leaving the kids out of it at all. It's happening everywhere. Chris Rufo just spent a month digging into drag queen story hours. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He joins us tonight. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. What did you find in the month you spent looking at this?
So,
well, I found that
obviously notice the Chiron. Kids forced to endure sexualized performances. Now, a tactic that the right wing has been using as they've been kind of pushing a lot of their anti-trans stuff is redefining what groomer means and redefining what sexualization means. Because they've clearly found it's a convenient and fast way to pass heavy criticism on what is, quite frankly, rather benign activities. And it's why you see these, kids are forced to endure sexualized performance. Did it look like anybody was forced to be there? Does it look like anybody was enduring anything other than hearing a, kids song with some little modern flair to make kids move around and have fun? It's not even like she said ass. It's not even like she said butt, for Christ's sakes. So, and he brings this guy on to, what's the word, legitimize his fear-mongering. Because as you might notice,
parents' instincts is largely correct.
Thanks so much for the Manhattan Institute. He joins in a month digging into
one moment
story hours. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He joins us.
Senior fellow from the Manhattan Institute. Now, I have no idea what the Manhattan Institute is. Most people who watch Fox News have no idea what the Manhattan Institute is. All they know is it sounds like some prestigious institution that must be doing their hard work and due diligence. But if you know anything about Christopher Rufo, he is a right-wing operative who has been pushing more of this anti-trans rhetoric in the right-wing spaces. So, this guy is legitimized the same way that what is it? Not Liberty. There's an organization on the right, I'm forgetting the name, but they essentially kind of weed through the court systems and judges to kind of find people with a more right-wing bent and push them forward. I don't remember what the organization is called off the top of my head, but this is basically the rhetorical and more what's the word? A more rhetorical and marketing. Oh, hey, Liberty Twitcher, how's it going? Voice side of that kind of campaign. But anyway, let's continue.
Chris, thanks so much.
I got a text message. 1 second.
What did you find in the month you spent looking at this?
Well, I found that parents' instincts is largely correct. A lot of parents are wondering
parents'
why is an
instincts
adult male putting on women's clothing and dancing and talking about sexual themes with other people's children. Not only
notice, why is an adult male wearing women's clothing? Now, I don't know about you, but this is America, and as far as I understand it, clothes do not require one. There's not restrictions on buying long ass, like 2-foot long boots. There aren't restrictions on men buying women's clothes. Again, this is more of an appeal towards freedom, so I don't really get what the big complaint there is. You know?
In libraries, but also in schools and other public institutions. But they're scared to say anything because they're worried about offending the sensibility of many of the administrators and left-wing ideologues who police speech under the umbrella of...
Ah, yes. The classic, you're pointing out that I am spreading false information and hate speech. You must not be in favor of the First Amendment. Very classic, a very classic argument by the right wing. Also, I want to actually show some people. I want to show people this really quick. Let's see if I can find it. Here, we'll continue watching. I'll show you in like 2 seconds.
LGBTQ tolerance. But the reality is quite simple. The academic queer theorists and the people who founded the drag queen story hour movement have left a trail of evidence in academic papers and manifestos that say the goal is very clear. They want to sexualize children, they want to subvert the middle-class family, and they want to basically eliminate what they call the sexual hierarchy in favor of creating a sexual connection between adult and child, which has, of course, long...
Now, oh God, this site is awful. Now, I'm not sure how many people here are, as you might have noticed from my the break videos, there is there's some Japanese wrestling going on. Now, I make that point only because Christopher Rufo and Tucker Carlson seem to have some kind of inherent issue with men wearing women's clothing, which, to my knowledge, I'm not sure what part of any of what that person was wearing was women's clothing. Now, again, I don't expect anybody to be as familiar with professional wrestling as I am, but I find it interesting because this right here is Tom Lawler. He is a wrestling podcaster, a professional wrestler for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and a former MMA fighter. And if you notice, part of his gear is wearing short shorts. Jean short shorts at that matter. Not too dissimilar from what the person in that drag queen story time. God, I'm getting my words mixed up. Drag queen story time was wearing. So when we say that clothes aren't gendered, this is what we mean. It would be ridiculous. And there's no conservative who would look at this picture of Tom Lawler wearing fucking jean booty shorts and argue that that is either sexual nor feminizing. I just want to point that out because I always find that very interesting. Oh my God. There we go.
Long been the kind of final taboo of the sexual revolution.
It was always the most basic taboo in our society. Stay away from the children, creep, or you will regret it.
You will regret it.
Any parent allow their child to be sexualized by an adult man with a fetish for kids? I mean,
2 reasons, I think.
And this is such a jump. This person's sitting in a chair reading a kid's book, and Tucker's already made the jump that they have a fetish for children? Is that the strong argument you'd like to make, Tucker? Because I hardly see them even interacting with the kids. For the most part, they're just reading a book. Like this stuff, this is the stuff that got people killed on Saturday night. Because this guy finds it weird that somebody would choose to wear clothes that he feels are gendered, that only women should be wearing. Tucker Carlson, this entire time, brings on this stooge from the Manhattan Institute to opine about all this nonsense in literature and in academia, when we all understand that all that's happened in academia is the study and a broad understanding of trans identity and an understanding of the trans community. But that has to be a conspiracy to these guys. That has to be some long-form campaign to target children. Because, let's be honest, they don't like trans people. They probably don't like gay people. But they can't just say that. So they twist it into being somehow about kids. Somehow. In the most tangential way possible. None of this, you couldn't draw a straight line between any of what this guy's talking about and, rape statistics or child predation. In fact, what I find most interesting is all of these campaigns all around the country where people, right-wingers specifically, are showing up at bars, showing up at clubs, showing up in LGBT spaces and places where there are drag shows, and assaulting these people, protesting them. I find it interesting that not one of them have been able to go to the police, file a complaint, make a claim of some law being broken, and watch the police go and actually investigate that and come back with, yes, there has been grooming, yes, there has been child predation, and there's a reason for that, because they don't actually think any of this is child predation. If they did, they wouldn't be talking about it on the news and going and protesting drag shows. They would be calling the police and having these people arrested and having this thing called evidence. But they don't. They just have their feels. And now we're in a climate and we're at a time where their feels are getting people killed. Their feels are harming others. Anyway, let's continue. Armed with my opinions. You have a lot of opinions going on today, huh?
The first reason is quite simple, is that people have been mystified and bought into this idea that it's somehow an expression of tolerance and exploration and gender creativity. But the
is Armed with My Opinions still in chat? Are you still here?
It's mandatory. New York City Public...
Armed with My Opinions, I have a question. So, you're asking about... So I see here, you're like, are you okay with minors being shown pornography by their parents? I would love for you to explain to me how what you're seeing on screen with that person just sitting in a chair, fully clothed, I would love to know how you find that pornographic and what about that is pornographic. I watch porn. I know what porn looks like. I'm really wondering, either you don't know what porn looks like or you're just lying. But you can tell me. I'm going to continue. You give me an explanation as to how you think that looks like porn.
Schools have organized dozens of these performances as young as
dozens.
Elementary school. These are
dozens, guys. That's what we're having an entire national conversation about. Conversation about dozens of events.
What one conservative commentator called
porn.
Quote, blessed.
Porn. Look at this person. Look at this person. Porn right there. Armed with My Opinions thinks this is porn. Apparently, my friend, you've got some boring porn tastes, or again, you're full of shit.
Of liberty to something that is now being subsidized and forced onto kids by the state itself. It's
that's fine.
that,
I'm still asking you. I realize you were talking to another chatter, but you're doing it in my chat. So I am interested to hear your opinion on this.
People should push back against this. And of course, people should arm themselves with the literature, and the people in
With
their
the
own words who have
literature.
advocated for this,
Which is
deep in
always
this
funny because
circle.
it's like, what literature? Never have I been able to be shown literature. I've seen propaganda. Literature, on the other hand, not a lot of literature.
Sexualization of children.
Yeah, people should definitely arm themselves. I agree with that. This is keep the kids out of it, period. Chris Rufo, thank you.
Yes. Now, Tucker Carlson naturally is going to say that when he says people should be arming themselves, he's going to use the excuses he's talking about with the literature. But do any of us actually think that he was referencing the literature there? When you say to somebody, people should arm themselves, you're not really talking about the literature. Tucker Carlson isn't interested in people showing up with pamphlets, with studies, with what? A copy of, like, What is a Woman by Matt Walsh or something? That's not what's going to be happening. You tell people they should be arming themselves and show up to places to oppose something, they're going to show up with the only other way that people know how to arm themselves, especially in America, and that's with guns. Hey. Here. Go ahead. Email this right up here. Go right ahead. That has always been up there. Actually, here. I got you. But on another note, while I get a Discord link up here for a man armed with his opinions. No, don't switch. Calm down. How is everyone's Tuesday going? Otherwise, obviously. Yeah. Type of parents who oppose drag queens presenting to children are the same backwards parents who think Target stores shouldn't have use the girls' restroom. No. Where's the damn thingy? Excuse me? Oh. That's not it, is it? God, I'm such a boomer. Do I have to update this? That's not happening. There we go. Let's see. Let's see if Armed with My Opinions actually decided to follow through and do the process properly. Let's see. I'll keep my email open for him. Keep my DMs open for him. Let's see. Okay. I don't see anything yet. We're going to keep that open for him. If he wants to come in, he can. I'm also a boomer, and I probably need his Discord account, and I'm not posting that in chat. I feel like that's a bad idea. You can just get it directly from me. Anyway. Type of parents who oppose drag queens presenting to children are the same backwards parents. I already read that. Let me at menus. Target made the right decision there. Where I work, there's a guy who uses the girls' room, and it's no big deal to anyone. He has the right to use whatever he's most comfortable with. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, look, the people who should be using the women's restroom are people who identify as women. It's rather simple. I think that's a pretty, it's also, you can kind of tell, there's also kind of a, no, go away. There's also, like, if you've ever met, like, even trans women, especially if they're like far enough in the process, it'd be even fucking weirder if they were using the, like, men's room. Be even weirder. Not only that, but also much more dangerous. Yeah, I know I'm a boomer, Thanks, armed with my opinions. I know I'm a boomer. I realize I'm old, all right? Making me feel very, what's the word? Making me feel very, I can't even think of the word right now. Make me feel very insecure about my oldness. Oh, I think I did copy it, did I not? Let's find out. This is either going to work or it's not. That feels like that's not going to work. Will this work? Will that work? Let's find out. I'll click on it and find out if it works. No, this is the Discord. This isn't what I wanted. This is not the link I wanted. This is too general. Oh my god. Where? Where's like a fucking shared link? The fuck am I supposed to do with that link you just sent? I know. I'm sorry. I don't use Discord that often. I really only use it to play what's the game with the I really only use it to play Yu-Gi-Oh with my friends online. Let's see. Is this it? Is this it? No. Where's the little option? No, not notifications, server settings. Invites? Invite code. Is this it? That can't be it, right? Okay. I'm gonna be an old person and okay, let's see. Send. What the oh goodness. This is a lot of reading. This is so much reading. Why is this not like I just send you oh what is this? Is this it? No, stop. No, this is my account. This is it create invite? Oh, am I just dumb? I'm probably just dumb. I'm just stupid. Okay. I might just be stupid. Let me know if that works. I hope it does. Okay. Hopefully that works. I'd make sure my genders. Is this you? I think I see somebody. Let's make sure everything's working here. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hi there. How are you? Oh, that sounds nice. I can't hear you, by the way, right now. Oh no. Oh no. Did something happen? Did something happen? Okay, go away. Did something happen? Hello? Are you still there? Oh no! They left. Oh no, they're back.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah? 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 Nope. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but for whatever reason you can't hear me. That's weird. Why am I not? This is my channel, damn it. Is my mic? Oh, my. I know why. 1 second. Where is it? I know why.
Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, I can. Now you can hear me, right?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
There we go. Okay, I had a feeling. I forgot to set my mic to this microphone. Sorry, it's a new mic. I'm not used to it. So, how's it going? Having
Great.
a nice night?
You enabled push to talk, so I have to push a button to say something. So it might take a second.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I like I was saying, I'm a fucking old person. I like just turned 30 this year, and I only use Discord to play Yu-Gi-Oh with my friends across the country. So I'm pretty technologically illiterate, honestly.
30's not old, but whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to chime in because you were talking about the I think, what was it, the drag story hour stuff, right?
Yeah, drag queen story. Yeah, hit me up. Yeah, what's up? What can I? What? So what's your concern? I'm curious because you mentioned pornography earlier. So I'm curious, like how you kind of got to that.
Yeah. Well, I was responding to somebody in the chat who's trolling. I didn't realize they were trolling at first, but it's actually interesting to me that you didn't recognize that the other guy is trolling because you actually agree with what he had to say. Now, think about what he said. He said, if a man wants to use the little girl's room, that's okay, and you didn't even bat an eye at that. Now, think about that. Why would a grown man go to use the ladies' room? I mean, if they're a man, they would just go to use the men's room, right? I mean, should women be allowed privacy?
I think everyone kind of deserves privacy going to the bathroom, but I mean,
so
assuming this person, I kind of glanced at their answer. I would assume the person they're talking about would be trans, and probably if they identify as a woman, I don't really see any problem with that.
Well, then they wouldn't be a guy, right? No, I mean, it's just interesting to me.
I don't know their like specific example. That's why I'm not really, their specific example is their example. I don't know the situation what they're talking about, but I'm curious. Do you think like, so there's like documented problems when trans women are forced to use like the men's room? Like, you recognize that, yeah? Like that's pretty inarguable. That's kind of.
Well, again, it depends on the context. I mean, I don't know. I think most people are just going to use the bathroom. It's not really like a big deal. But then you have these stories about, guys who were caught in the women's room being perverts. I mean, that happens quite frequently. So I think it depends on what the motivations are. In general, I would prefer it if people just use the bathroom that their private parts correspond to. I think that, I don't think that men should have access to women and women's spaces. Women deserve their own spaces, but just they deserve their own sports. They deserve their own bathrooms. So I don't think we should be putting men into the equation.
I think that can be kind of reasonable depending on what you're talking about. But also, there are co-ed bathrooms in like parts of Europe, and I'm sure parts of this country there are like family bathrooms. There are co-ed bathrooms. I'm not like, I understand that there is the risk of predation. I have only, there was like a hotel that I stayed at. It's actually a really funny story. The place is haunted probably, but yeah, it had like a co-ed bathroom situation. It was a bit odd. I mean,
well, if the place
you kind of just go, it was
haunted. I don't think you could use that as an example of a good co-ed bathroom situation. I mean, how do we know that it's haunted because of that reason or not? So
I mean, it could not. It was not to tell the full story, but basically it's the hotel that they based like an American Horror Story season on, and we didn't know that when we checked in, and then we're there for a night, and I was like, this is a bit of this is weird vibes. I got very if you've ever seen The Tenant by it's like a movie from Roman Polanski, not the best. Yeah, it was very much that vibes for the hotel. You look out and you see like across at the other hotel. Is not my favorite situation. But I understand what you're saying when it comes to grown men. What's the word? Grown men in like bathrooms with small girls and everything. But I would also argue that what you're describing isn't a trans issue. What you're describing is, quite frankly, a like straights issue, is it not? Because if trans women who are going into women's bathrooms are just going to the bathroom, they're going to the bathroom that they identify more with, and the bathroom that they socially match up with more. Whereas I'm sure we've all heard stories of I think there was like a high schooler a couple years ago who like put on a skirt and pretended to be trans and like attacked his girlfriend at the time at like a high school, and that's obviously not a trans issue, that's a straights issue.
Here's why I would push back on your claim that it's a straights issue, because number one, if you look at the rate of sexual assault and pedophilia amongst the even just the sort of male homosexual community in comparison to heterosexuals, it's actually much higher. And to the extent that this is a problem, I mean, even homosexual publications have discussed this particular issue, so they acknowledge it themselves. So I don't think you could say that this is a straights issue when you look at the statistical data on this particular subject.
I'd be really interesting to read that because I've, in all of my life, have kind of heard the opposite. I'm sure we all know about the Catholic Church, and the highest percentage of predation to kids happens in the household. Mostly people who know and who are close to families usually. I don't have whatever study or statistic you're specifically
Well,
referring to. If you want to post it in chat, I'd be happy to look at it. But
I'm not sure how the Catholic Church example refutes my point, because this is mostly male priests and I believe choir boys. And so this is, again, we're talking about homosexual relations, right?
Well, I don't know if those people would necessarily even really identify as part of the heterosexual community, really.
Well, I don't know what they identify
because
with. Because
there's quite a bit of predation of like girls as well in the church.
The act that they're engaging with, that is the most controversial, that brought the most heat to the Catholic Church, was between males. It's not, and again, this only reinforces my point when I said earlier that the rate of sexual assault and pedophilia amongst the LGBTQ community is much higher than the heterosexual community, despite the LGBT community being a minority in comparison.
Right. See, yeah, I would probably mostly just disagree when you say community, only really because I think it's a pretty far jump to say that there are Christian priests sexually assaulting children within their flock, and then extrapolate that to the gay community, which is very different. The gay community and the Christian Catholic community, very, very different socially, very, very different. Just in terms of the circles that they kind of roam around. Again, like, I understand what you're kind of trying to say, but again, this is, if someone's going into Target and they identify as a woman, they're almost certainly just going in to use the bathroom. I can't say that sexual assault doesn't happen from, not from any community, but all communities. There is evidence of sexual assault. Yeah,
I actually agree with you, because I think the bathroom issue is a red herring. I think that the issue that people should be focusing on is more so the indoctrination that happens via the media, or as you've seen on these news clips and everything else. That there's a lot of attention around this drag queen storytime hour, or even just in situations where adults are in provocative clothing and twerking in front of prepubescent children. I'm not exactly sure why this is something that the left wants to defend, and if you want to defend that, I'm curious how you see that playing out, because I think the majority of the public, even if they're not political, will immediately be repulsed by such behavior, and it won't bode well for your side in the long run.
So I would first definitely start with, in terms of popularity, in terms of like the electorate, the midterms of the past month kind of bears that out to be a bit incorrect. The right pushed really, really hard on pushing a lot of the anti-LGBT stuff and a lot of the anti-trans panic, but we kind of saw that not really pay off in the long run. They didn't pick up nearly as many seats as I think they thought they did. But that aside,
under expectations.
Yeah.
I believe they have control of the House now, right? So
I think the House is, they'll have about a. Sorry, I'm looking for the video really quickly. They have, I want to say they're going to be having like a 4-person lead in the House, so the margins are not going to be very large in their favor.
Well, I don't think that just because it wasn't a blowout is necessarily indicative of the fact that they were still. I think it's commonly expected that the party in power usually underperforms in the midterms, and now they're saying, well, it's going to be a split government now, but they're claiming that this is actually a victory for the Democrats because the Republicans didn't completely blow them out. I don't think that that's necessarily. I see panic from the right, and they're having some kind of like soul searching going on now. And then I see people, the Democrats, celebrating. I think both sides kind of get it wrong. I don't think that you can say that this is a total victory for the Democrats, and I don't think that the Republicans need to do too much soul searching just because of their law, just because they didn't perform as well as they had expected.
Right. I mean, the electoralism aside, I'm curious. I don't know if you're watching the stream right now. Are you still, or are you just on Discord at the moment?
I'm on Discord.
Okay. So, okay, 1 second. Let me see if I should be able to screen share really quickly, or at least I hope I can. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This. Yep. God. Yeah. Whatever. I don't care. Let's see. Where's the video I'm looking for? Oh, why do I have to look this hard for it? Did I just exit? Am I still here? Okay, I am still here. Okay, I guess that's not going to work. Maybe that won't work. Maybe I won't get to share my screen. But I'm curious. So we both watched kind of the same video, and we watched the drag queen in question here do like a little dance, and you mentioned twerking. I'm curious, did that look like twerking to you? I mean, I listened.
I was referring
right.
more to, like, for instance, there was I think a few months ago or so, I kind of lost track of time on this one, but I recall.
Welcome to the world, buddy.
There was a drag event at some public venue, and that's where people, I think it was a sex club or some sort, or maybe a strip club. I'm not really sure what the venue was, but they had kids coming there. And so that raised a lot of controversy.
Right. I mean, a strip club that's empty and doesn't have naked people around it, that's really just a regular club and bar, is it not?
Well, the fact that the venue of choice was a strip club, I think, is already kind of, it's like already a sexual context, right? I mean, why couldn't it be somewhere else? Why are all of these things somehow they all circle back to sexuality? It's kind of odd.
Well, I mean, I'm not bringing up sexuality. That's mostly the right. I don't know what your political leanings are, so I'm not going to say you, but like this is one of those things where I think venues get picked because people, well, specifically more people in the LGBT community, are familiar with people who do sex work and who go to these sorts of places. There's also a lot of drag shows that take place in bars because a lot of drag shows are usually in, places where people can drink and do all that sorts of stuff.
I don't think.
But then they open up in the. No, I mean, there's bars in Chili's. There's bars in your local TGIF.
I mean, I go far as to say I don't even think Hooters is an appropriate place for children. But so, it depends on how.
Hooters is an interesting conversation. I'll hand you that. But I do think the Hooters conversation has more to do with, I think, the show that the women who are working there. Those are waitresses. Those are service workers that are very explicitly being what's the word showed around in pretty, it's toned down nowadays, but back when I was a kid, Hooters was incredibly provocative in terms of the clothing that they have them wear.
The restaurant is named Hooters. I don't think that this is it's not a very worthwhile debate. We all know what the place is. We all know what the employees look like. Okay, and you're not going to get hired there unless you you probably won't even get hired there unless you're an attractive woman with a big set of knockers. So there you go. I mean, I don't think that's appropriate for children.
Well, the thing is that any drag queen doesn't necessarily even have those features. The only real bar for entry for being a drag queen, for the most part, as far as I can tell, is usually makeup and usually you're doing something interesting with your hair. None of it is crazy cleavage. Not to say that it can't, but not by definition the same way something like Hooters is. Hooters, you're not wrong. You kind of do have to have a nice set on you, but to be a drag queen,
again,
it's not really as big of an issue.
Even outside of the venues, I mean, you can even go look it up on YouTube probably. But there's been gay pride parades where they have, for some odd reason, parents decided to bring their kids to these gay pride parades. And you have little boys like twerking. Like who teaches them that? Where do they even get that idea from? It's obviously from the parents or what they're witnessing. And I don't. It's just very. As somebody who's seeing that, it's very. I have to say, I'm sorry. It's very uncomfortable to witness kids behaving that way. I mean, it's the same thing as if you wouldn't dress up a kid in a bikini and parade them around. It's just weird.
Well, it's actually funny you mentioned the bikini part because, I remember growing up. There's like a sunscreen company with like a little girl on it, and like there's like a dog pulling at her outfits. There's been pretty innocuous stuff throughout all of media. Even
that's an innocuous example, but like
it's a bit, yeah.
Some kid twerking at a gay pride. Okay,
I mean, I think you're a little bit being. I think you're fixating a lot on like twerking, which I would encourage you to go look at.
I'm only reacting to what I have witnessed with my own two. Like I trust my.
I understand that, right? And so let me ask you something. Did you go to like summer camps at all growing up?
Yes.
So did you ever like spend any time with like the younger kids in those age brackets? Usually most summer camps are around 6 years old is like the youngest they take, and usually around, I don't know, like 10, 11, 12 or something is the eldest they take. But do you notice kind of the different ways in which the youngest ones interact and goof off and the ways kind of the older ones do?
I haven't thought about that. I was maybe 7, 8 years old when I went to summer camps.
Right. So I talked about this last stream. I don't know if you watched it, but I worked at summer camps, and growing up, we would, in my house, at a friend's house, we would put on shows for the family. These were rather, quite frankly, if I watched them today, really cringy. But, this was in the 90s. You grab a boombox, you grab a cassette tape with most likely, like a Disney movie soundtrack on it. And you do a little like song and dance and do all the rest of that stuff, and the parents clapping, and they have a good time. And I don't think anybody would find that to be super subversive. And while working at like summer camps for a long time, a lot of young kids kind of just goof off, and dancing is a way for them to express themselves. So I feel like you're being a little uncharitable towards the twerking bit. Like I know you said you've seen what you've seen, and I'm not going to discount that. But like, do you think you're letting this thing that you've always seen now kind of be informed by this panic over it? Because it's always been happening. Kids have always danced around and looked stupid, but now it's called twerking.
I understand the points that you're trying to make here. I just think that it's very odd that you have to stretch an example so far to take an example of kids goofing around and then trying to rope that into, the example that I used of some kid twerking. Because what it is there's a difference between, first of all, kids that young are not even inherently sexual. So it's very strange because it's like, where are they getting that from? Who's exposing them
to dancing?
To twerking. And so, I mean, do you think that twerking is not provocative and sexual behavior in and of itself?
I don't think really anymore the same way certain dances were thought of as really provocative. Dance in general has kind of always been a medium that people are uncomfortable with. Like, people were uncomfortable with Elvis shaking his hips for a long time. And now we all understand that that's not that subversive.
Elvis Presley was not an 8-year-old child doing that on television. If he was, I would have a problem with it.
I mean, what would be the problem with it? He was just dancing. He's dancing like anybody else dances.
I think that you were trying to frame it just sort of in a vacuum. Oh, it's just people moving their. Well, you could just extend that logic to anything else. Oh, it's just people moving their body parts around. Or what's wrong with somebody flashing somebody in a public place? I mean, that's just the body that they were born with, and they're just moving around. They're just particles in space. But all of these things are contextual. So, for example, you talk about well, just an innocuous sort of dance move. I don't think that. But again, you're talking about gay pride parades where people are walking around in leather daddy outfits. So, and then you look over to your right or something, and you see some little kid twerking on some gay pride parade video, and it's like, well, hang on a second. So there's a lot of sort of provocative sexual imagery at these events, and then you're going to tell me that, oh, well, it's just a dance move, despite the context that it's being performed in. I mean, and never mind the fact that twerking itself is, even amongst adults, I think seen as sexually provocative. I don't think that's controversial to say. I think most people would agree with that, especially when you see it in the context of, I don't know, rap videos or whatever. I mean, we can all kind of, this is intuitive.
I mean, to me, now this might be a personal bias, but I also think this is rather, given the prevalence of rap music in our media right now, it's the number one like genre of music right now. I do think that there is a general what's the word, normalization of like dances that are found in that genre. I think twerking also, I think, again, I don't know what video you watched, but if you ask, watching the Tucker Carlson video I just watched, right, and the sort of dancing that kids do that one would have to call twerking, I think would be a bit of a stretch, only really because I've never seen kids be able to put one foot in front of the other very well. And even in this video and Tucker Carlson could have found the exact video you're talking about where a kid did like a Cardi B level twerk on somebody, but he didn't. And this is kind of the issue I have, is that one example, I'm not saying didn't happen, but I think you're extrapolating that out to a much broader reach, quite frankly. I think you're extrapolating that really far out. When Tucker Carlson wants to make a point about a drag queen story hour or whatever, he pulls this video, and I watched the kids in this video, and they could hardly hula hoop if they got handed one. They're just moving their hips, and I don't really see how any of that is as provocative as it's kind of been made out to be by right-wing media.
Okay, so you're saying that Tucker could have made a better segment with better examples. Okay, sure, I can agree with that.
Look. I would love to see. Look, I would love to see stronger evidence from all of this, all the provocative claims that I hear, but I've never been able to see it. Never. Now, I'll give you, Pride does have leather daddies, and leather daddies is not the best thing to have, I think, in front of kids.
It goes even further than that. For example,
Pride events.
You check out the Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco, you could see middle-aged men just walking around with their cock and balls out, and people have their kids around. That's even worse.
I mean,
so I was using a very mild example.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not the authority on Pride events. There are things that I think should probably be more on the adult side, but there are certainly things that I think everybody can appreciate at Pride events. I've gone to Pride events. We have them here in Denver around the usual season everybody else does. They're rather innocuous events. Obviously, there are going to be these edge cases and these individual anecdotes that I don't deny happen, but I don't think there's this mass, like, national movement of child predation that Tucker Carlson and such are pushing, quite frankly. They're using a lot of these small examples to push a lot of this. And I said this earlier, is it not a bit surprising that we've never seen arrests of any of these drag queens or anybody at these events?
Well, that's not true. I think just recently there was one of those drag queens,
Mm-hmm.
or at least one of those people who dressed up as the drag queens at those story time hours or whatever, actually did get arrested recently. I don't have the article on hand, but maybe if you Google drag queen arrest story time hour like on Google or something, you'd probably find a couple of news articles. But that's just one example. I think that if you go down the line, I mean, we're not just talking about. I mean, drag queens are usually
Again, that's one example. Like, this is what I mean, where like it's one example. I'm looking for like a pattern of behavior, and I just don't see it.
The pattern of behavior is evident when you're not just looking for only the drag queen equation. I mean, it's also the fact.
But that's what they're opposing. I only stick on that because that's the thing that they're opposed. That's the thing that that's the vehicle they're using to like launder their rhetoric, quite frankly.
Because, well, drag queens tend to be gay men. They are not transgenders, as far as I know, usually. So I think that
in general, as far as I know, it not necessarily, but that can be true. Yes,
I think they tend to be gay men. If there is I don't know, is there a more dominant pattern here other than that? I think that is the common denominator usually.
So I'm looking at a AP article. Let's see. The headline is "Man Charged for Child Porn Didn't Work for Drag Queen Story Hour." Let's see. Misleading anti-LGBT rhetoric in recent months has targeted drag story times, kid-friendly story hours in public spaces, led by performers dressed in drag, which claim that the events are abusive or harmful to children. That is what they are saying, by the way.
Can I actually mention something? I don't think
by all means. I
don't think you can trust the Associated Press because I think just within the last week or so, there was a story that allegedly Russia had fired missiles into Poland. I believe the AP reported on that, and they have not issued a retraction or corrected their story in any way. So I can't trust that as a source immediately, offhand. No.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm gonna have to do this to you that you're kind of blaming the ref on this one, but I understand. I don't keep up with all of the updates. I would be really surprised. AP is pretty good about that stuff, but
it's a disreputable source at this point
for one story. Because most news organizations ran with that Russia-Poland situation.
A story that could have kicked off World War III, I think, is that's the line for me.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Wartime reporting is always incredibly difficult, but I think that's a bit of a bar. But that's your choice. Whatever bar you set for reputable news sources is your choice. I just want to point out to everybody that as far as I can tell, according to AP News, that didn't happen. So let's give me that that is correct and that person did not work for drag queen storytime. Would that change your mind on that case?
If that were like just for the sake of the argument, if that turned out to be true, it was still a homosexual male who got charged with this particular crime.
I mean,
unless he was
I don't.
Straight.
Yeah.
If he was straight.
I mean, he might have. Yeah. If he was straight, is that a straights problem?
If he hypothetically speaking, if he were straight, no, it would still not be. It would not be indicative of any sort of pattern amongst straight people. No.
But we just found like a straight person who had child porn. There's a lot of straight people who have child porn.
Yes, but if you compare the population to which straight. I think usually men, right? It's very seldom.
Yeah.
So straight men versus gay men. I think if you look at the comparison between when you're comparing the population size versus the frequency at which these arrests are made, it's very concerning the rate at which it happens amongst the homosexual population.
If you have a link for any of that, I would love to read it because that sounds pretty contrary to anything that I've heard before. But also,
I'm on my phone, so
I understand.
We can do this another time. And
yeah.
Armed with all sorts of sources and
right. No, I understand. I appreciate you just off the cuff throwing up and jumping down here with me. I appreciate that. But yeah, so also I'm curious. So like it feels like, and this is, it kind of feels like, you know, I point out that there is a rather large segment of the straight male community that engages in child porn, and you seem to bristle at the idea of extenuating that to a broader group. But you've mentioned one case of this happening with the drag queen community, and it seems like you're more comfortable, again, extrapolating that. Like, do you not kind of see how that's a bit?
Sure, I could be wrong on this, but I think when it comes to the CP stuff, I think that it's usually men who are caught possessing CP featuring, I believe, prepubescent boys. If it's women, if it's girls that they're caught in possession of that type of material,
Epstein.
I'd be kind of surprised.
You'd be surprised? That'd be interesting.
If that were the case, yeah, I told you that I'm not 100% sure on that, though.
Right. Neither of us have the studies or any of that sitting directly in front of us, so I can understand that. But I just worry a lot of times because
there's a history behind that too, you know, because
history
before NAMBLA was I think excommunicated from Pride events in the 80s, they were seen very frequently at those types of events. And I think a lot of notable NAMBLA members are people like Allen Ginsberg and sort of these other like champions of young boy and man relations.
Right, yeah. There's been some I had to kind of Google what NAMBLA is because I haven't heard that in a very long time. Oh geez. The idea that you would be able to start an organization around that is something else.
Well, it's an advocacy group.
Advocate for.
It's not illegal, but it's disgusting. And I'm sure if you look at some of the individual members, if you investigated them, I'm sure you find all sorts of illegal stuff.
Yeah, that's. I'm okay. I'm okay not looking too far into that. Also, I don't feel like getting flagged by the FBI. But
so I think you are trying to establish whether or not I'm trying to say that I think that this type of behavior is. I don't think most people. I don't know. I don't think that most gay people are like this. But I'm saying that I think why don't we just keep the kids out of it? I mean, why even put yourself in a situation in which you have to start nitpicking and using these examples to justify kids being in these sort of hypersexualized environments? I mean, why not just keep them out of it?
I mean, I think again, it's all about your definition of hypersexual. Again, I wouldn't call Drag Time Story Hour whatever hypersexual. Like when you say sexual, what are you talking about? Because I notice that gets thrown around a lot. A lot. You'll see these people say, "Oh, they're sexualizing children. They're making everything." What do? And again, I'm not going to assume you're right wing or anything. But what do you mean when you say that? Like when you say sexualization, sexualizing, what is going through your head when, like, what are you thinking about when you say that?
Sure, yeah. So what I'm thinking is, for example, that some of the venues chosen for these events, and I guess you try to explain it away by being, oh, well, they know people in the sex work industry. But see, that, I mean, there you go. It's like these connections are clearly there, and you recognize that. So it's like,
I mean, a lot of people know a lot of people in different, like, what's the word? Industries. I don't believe in the stigmatization of people who work in the sex work industry. I've all the respect for the strippers of America as I do the lumber workers of Canada. I mean, I don't.
Well, I have a different view on that, but let's not get bogged down in side arguments.
I mean, that might just be the general disagreement. If you find that, sex workers and stuff don't what's the word? Don't deserve recognition or respect in certain parts of society. I think that's nobody
deserves respect. That's something that's earned, not given.
You don't think people deserve respect just by their nature of living?
People deserve respect because of how they earn it. I don't respect strangers, right? I don't think you do.
I mean, you
Maybe
don't.
do.
I mean, you don't like cut in front of strangers in line and cut them off on the street, do you?
But that's mainly because I respect myself, right? Because if I did something like that and I put myself in a precarious situation, that's going to show that I don't care about my own safety, for example. So that's more so respect towards myself than somebody else.
So you wouldn't like cut somebody off in traffic because you don't want confrontation?
Because I respect my safety, for example, right?
I mean, people who just cut people off generally are just driving, I think, and people who get cut off tend to get a bit, I've been cut off before. I tend to shrug it off.
You're asking why I'm not just inconsiderate to random people.
Sure.
Okay. Well,
I respect people, so I'm nice to people. But like that's not based on that's not based on them earning it. I don't really think a lot of people need to earn a certain amount of respect. There are things that people I think do earn in the realm of respect as such, like my loyalty and stuff like that. But I don't think there are. I don't think it's I don't really think it's it's really
it's just common courtesy.
Right. I would say common courtesy is respect.
Maybe, sure, I don't know, but I think when you say respect, it's like you're like saying like, oh yeah, like this person's really like I don't know, somebody that should be revered or something. I don't necessarily. That's not how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody's wearing like a she, her, they, them, he, him, a name tag, do you feel like you should respect that person's request to be identified properly?
Because of the fact that we live in a society in which we have to abide by social norms.
I mean, you can take that out of it. I'm just in like a just for you, like regardless of societal, whatever. Like,
it depends on if I felt like it was making a big deal about.
Like if they're handing you your drink and they say have a nice day, enjoy your whatever the hell you drink at Starbucks.
If individual people are going to be nice to me, I'm not going to be mean to them just because. No.
Right. So, and like, and that's kind of the thing I notice is a lot of people seem to be really, I actually saw it the other day, like I had to go to like the Xfinity store or Comcast or whatever and go deal with nonsense. And there was a woman there who's being really disrespectful and kind of got in somebody's face. And, I think, they had kind of longer hair, and I don't know if they were trans or what their story was, but they were rather disrespectful and kept referring them by obviously the wrong pronouns. They had like their little name tag and stuff. And do you think that's like wrong on their part?
Say that last part one more time. What did they do exactly?
They were just being very disrespectful and actively not using the proper pronouns that like the customer service person had identified with their little badge and name tag stuff, which they obviously read because they like squinted to read their name and just disregarded that part of their name tag.
I think it's just petty and needless, but it's not like, for example, I wouldn't do that, but I personally don't view that other person as their imagined sort of gender or whatever. In my own head, I know what they are. I just don't, I have to put on a show, right? Because we live in polite society. I can't just be an asshole.
I mean, I like polite society, don't you? Don't get me wrong. I like playing Red Dead Redemption 2, but I don't think I'd want to live in a world where I get shot for disrespecting somebody at the local saloon, right?
That's just because I'm, again, this comes down to individual temperament. Like, I'm not going to flip out and cause a scene, but in my own head, I know what I think, right? But if, for example, if you use that same example, I don't know, and you take it to, I mean, you think you get away with that in the hood or in some of these other sort of ethnic neighborhoods? I don't know if that type of behavior flies. For some reason, it's strange to me that amongst, I think white liberals or just whites in general are just sort of more accommodating to all of these kinds of views and behaviors for whatever reason. I don't know what it is.
Towards what kind of views and behaviors?
I think the LGBT stuff is far more popular just amongst, far more popular and accepted amongst whites than it is amongst Latinos, blacks, Asians, etc.
I do certainly think I'm not 100% sure of the statistics, but I do know that the black community has a general there are issues within the black community when it comes to LGBT issues, mainly stemming around I think a how would I describe it? It comes down I've heard it kind of been described in a way of we kind of have enough problems going on. We don't really have time for that sort of conversation broadly, which I think is actually starting to be had.
Oh,
but
talk to. I think if you
yeah,
spread around like that around just regular people, they're gonna be like, "What the? You want some gay shit, bruh?" You know, that type of thing.
yeah, I still hear. Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it around people I work with and people I'm friends with, and it is still very it's kind of one of those things that I'm always just like, it's 2022, man. We can't. What are we doing? Why are we still
it's
doing this?
Year, right?
Yeah. Almost 2023. We're almost there.
But I think my point I only brought that up because I think that people tend to somehow twist this into like, oh, it's only white male straight conservatives who have this problem. I just don't think that narrative is true.
I mean, yeah, look at Kanye. Clearly Kanye has like anti-Semitic problems, and that wasn't something I don't think you would identify broadly with the black community very well, but clearly him and Kyrie Irving are revealing a yeah, I mean, probably you and yeah.
That was definitely not unknown if you ever paid attention to what black community leaders talk about at times. I mean, I don't think that those sentiments are that rare. You just have to talk to people, you know.
I think you have to kind of go searching for those and kind of be around a little bit more of it for those side comments people sometimes make.
I think a lot of progressive leftists and liberal sorts are a lot of them tend to be kind of sheltered. Actually, they're not really street smart, nor do they have much interaction with the communities that they tend to talk on behalf of. So that's a separate topic altogether.
I mean, I do think that kind of lends itself to why white communities are very comfortable with the LGBT community, just because that's kind of the you know, when you're black, you're a minority by skin tone, by place in society. When you're white, you know, if you're white and you're gay, your whiteness is going to be undermined by the fact that you're gay. So that's kind of the closest when it comes to the marginalizing line for white folks.
Yeah, but like, you know, it's just interesting to me because I remember maybe 15 years ago, people said, well, you know, gay marriage, whatever, like it's, you know, this is between adults and this and that. And It just seems so strange to me that we're now like, I don't know who's doing what, but it seems like the conversation just keeps shifting into places that I think are very unnecessary. I mean, these are just intuitive on a personal level. Like I don't want to have, if I had a kid, I wouldn't take them to some event like that where there's adults and these, like I said, sometimes provocative. Maybe not in the example that Tucker used, that you were showing, but I think that if you look in, you look around, you'll find examples in other places too, that where the attire is maybe more revealing, or, you know, the situation I think is maybe a bit more sexualized than say in just some random bookstore. Like, you know, I gave you the example of the strip club or whatever, right? But I think you think that this is just moral panic, right?
Yeah. This seems like the moral panic that has kind of always crept up every couple of years. You know, there was the moral panic over Mortal Kombat, and there was the moral panic over comic books in the 90s. There's been moral panic over kind of any kind of popular social-ish movement.
I think
moral panics are kind of part of the process.
But I think that these things, even the examples that you use, like Mortal Kombat or comic books, I think that these things, there is a conversation to be had around how they warp kids' minds, for example. But I think that because
that's not 100% true. We haven't seen. There's no correlation between violent video games and violent kids, is there? I've never seen it. If you have,
there's a correlation. There's a correlation between violence and video games. I think even the U.S. military.
You're correct. I should say causation.
I don't think they cause it. I think it's like a part of a broader sort of social apparatus.
Oh yeah,
Video games
I
just
think
one
our
method.
society has gotten more violent over the last. I've only been around for 30 years, so I can only speak to the early 90s to now. But I would definitely say our society's gotten more violent, especially after
Don't you think that we
after.
should be giving a 5-year-old?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Should we give 5-year-olds? We shouldn't give 5-year-olds copies of Grand Theft Auto, right?
No, but I don't necessarily think it's earth shattering or something that's earth shattering. Not only that, but we have ratings boards. That would be something that's up to the parents and irresponsible parents.
That stuff doesn't.
I don't think really that's a problem with kids playing video games. But like that's one of those parents things. I got away with playing San Andreas way too early because I kept my copy of Blockbuster. That one was on me. But that's parents who buy their kids M-rated games are no different from parents who take their kids R-rated movies.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I agree with you. But I think that just in general, the fact that they're exposed to this stuff one way or another does have some kind of effect. We can't just pretend that it doesn't. For example, the wide availability of and easy access to pornography. I mean, obviously, there's going to be minors who stumble upon that stuff, and I do think that it's worth examining how this stuff affects their psyche. For example, I mean, even now they're talking about when I was a teenager, we never had this thing called incels and stuff like that.
Can we pause for like 2 seconds?
So
Can we pause for like 2 seconds? Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
How old are you?
Sure.
How old are you?
32.
32. Okay, so you're a 90 then. 1990, yes. Right? Hey, there it is. Early 90s. I'm a 92. Yeah. I was just curious. I was curious as to your age range and where you're coming from framing wise. But anyway, continue. I was just curious.
Yeah. We didn't have that stuff and I was a teenager, like 13 years ago or something. So it's like not even that long. And
tell me about it.
In that amount of time. Yeah. I mean, just in that amount of time, it's like, how is it that we've shifted? Like, how do these cultural conversations come into play? So something's changing. People's normal relations are being eroded amongst each other to the point that we're now talking, like, why is there this uptick of involuntary celibate men? I mean, what's going on there?
So the incel stuff is super interesting. I haven't delved too much into it. I do notice that are you aware of who Andrew Tate is, or I guess was now at this point?
Yeah, but you know why people like that come around? Because there's nobody to fill that space. Because on the one hand, the leftists are saying you shouldn't be a man, or that's toxic to have masculine traits. And then the other side is saying, you know what, you can have masculine traits and you can party with us. We're not going to cancel you or call you names or this and that. But it's like, okay, but so one side's just giving up, and then the other side is basically giving voice to these concerns. But then you look at somebody like Andrew Tate, and I think it's like, I don't know, he was involved in human trafficking and pimping girls out for OnlyFans, and that's stuff that I'm morally opposed to. So, but it's also strange to me because, see, the left, I think they have no problem with OnlyFans. They encourage that kind of stuff. So I have a problem with all of these different things.
So I would actually have to mostly agree with you on the fact that, on the point that the left has not been great at addressing men's issues. And I think a reason for that is generally because, quite frankly, there's a lot of leftists who get really, I think, militant when they think about not the hierarchy. What am I thinking? What's the word? I always forget these very key words. I've never been a vocab kid, but what is it? The patriarchy. That's what it is. They've been leftists have been very good about, I think, opposing the patriarchy, not understanding that they need to give some kind of alternative to men who, quite frankly, look at the patriarchy and go, that would have been me in that position. Or, what am I supposed to do now that there's not this strong position for me to fit myself into society. And the left has not been good at that. I will absolutely grant you that. But the right has been, I mean, you mentioned earlier, Andrew Tate, the whole, human trafficking bit and everything else. The right has been pushing a lot of this damaging stuff towards these men to isolate them even more than they were already isolated, and put them in positions that they are even less likely of finding relationships and keeping those relationships, and then steering them towards, not just anti-woman stuff, but again, the kind of the anti-LGBT, oh, we used to be a country, we used to be this, we used to be that sort of line. It all kind of feels like, they've kind of weaponized these men who need some kind of direction, but they've weaponized them to oppose a group that's just kind of going about their lives, have always been around, and mostly just want to use the bathrooms that they identify with. And now they're groomers. Now they're sexualizing kids, because protecting kids, protecting women used to be men's familial job, I guess.
Well, I think the easiest way to even not have to deal with any of this type of stuff, I mean, just on the issue of, because the original discussions about the Tucker video that you were showing. So I just think it'd be much safer just to not involve children to begin with. I just don't see the benefit of it.
I mean, I think when we talked about video games, do you not think, and I meant to say this, but I got kind of distracted by my own tangent a bit, but I tend to kind of think that, the same way, parents who, as a good example, my dad took me to see South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut before, like, in theaters. I was nowhere near the age of 18. I don't even think I was 10 at that point. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I've come out to be some shining example of a star citizen in the United States. But, I think that some of these decisions should be being left up to the parents. I think if there's a parent out there who goes, hey, I got no problem with the drag queen stuff. It has, I have an understanding of it. I know how to explain it to my kids. Then I don't really see what the harm is. And I mean, that's, it's a bit of an appeal towards freedom, but, unless there was, again, a real heavy, causative link between kids who attend drag queen story hour and child predation, then I just kind of feel like, people get to do what they want in a free country. If you don't want your kids going to a drag show, totally respect that. I totally respect that. But I do think it's on the right and on people who oppose it, such as yourself, to have something a little bit more concrete if you want to, kind of ban some of this stuff, because they are trying to ban some of this stuff in states. This has gone farther than just cultural back and forthing between, both sides.
I guess it depends on what they're banning specifically. I don't know what the law itself actually states, but I think that
I know in Texas there is a law that no venue can hold a drag show of any kind and have children present. Or actually, yeah. No. That's a lie. There is a law. The law specifically states you cannot have a person, a trans person, essentially. What's the word? Perform is the word that they used. Perform in front of children. They left it very broad, and they specifically that's what I'm looking for. Redefined trans and stuff like that as being sexual as sexualization, and it was how they rewrote kind of this bill that I know it hasn't passed yet, but it's in like kind of the whole process. But this got brought up in I mentioned pro wrestling earlier. I watch pro wrestling a lot. I'm a big pro wrestling fan. But it mentions earlier it would actually disallow any trans pro wrestlers from wrestling in the state of Texas if there are kids present. If there was a pro wrestler in Texas and they did a match, you know, that's normal match. We've all seen pro wrestling. I'm sure you remember pro wrestling from the 90s. And there was like a child present, they could be arrested. Those are the types of laws that are getting passed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know. I guess that's a little bit extreme, but again,
I mean, it is Texas. They go big.
But in general, I don't know. I don't know how you would legislate this stuff, because again, you could easily argue your way out of it. Probably when it comes down to it, you know, even if you're arrested, you still have to go to court and all that stuff. And then it would be like a big national story. And you know, I just have a hard time believing that anybody would actually get prosecuted for stuff like that, even if that was a law. But sometimes laws are just used to kind of maybe
intimidate.
To set certain norms. I mean, murder is illegal, right?
Right. I would say murder is a negative for society. You know, drag shows that actively make an effort to be well, yeah, but I mean, a drag show that's kid friendly is like anything else. If it's made to be kid friendly, then you know, then
if it's kid friendly where the drag queen is wearing what I would like the Taliban style headdress. Okay, how about that?
A Taliban that's your bar for. I mean,
then there could be no ambiguity, right?
I mean, sure, but isn't that a bit of you know, isn't that basically setting the bar so low that nobody could pass under it, or maybe so high that nobody could pass over it? I don't know how that phrasing works, but
maybe if it's a hot day, they can show their face.
Well, are you not gracious?
I'm just saying, you know, I'm not the one in charge here, but I'm saying that, you know, I can see the situation in which, you know, maybe you could have a law like that. I don't know. Bring it up to a legislator. Maybe they could introduce that. I'm sure I don't think it would pass, though.
I mean, they passed an anti-Sharia law in, I believe, Ohio. Granted, I know that was like, I think that was maybe 2003, 2005 or something like that. But they did pass a very explicit anti-Sharia law because they were worried that it was going to make its way to Ohio or whatever Midwestern state.
That was the early 2000s war on terror, right? Where they were kind of, you know, just trying to stick it to any Muslims. But I think, you know, what's interesting is now we've come to the point where the Muslims in places like Dearborn, Michigan are like, they have an issue with this stuff. They have a more passionate issue with this stuff than I do. I mean, and I'm like, and I'm secular, right? I'm not even really religious, and I'm certainly not a Muslim.
Right. I mean, I mean, don't you find it interesting that two of the groups that find this stuff so objectionable are both, you know, pretty radical theocrats?
You think that just Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan are radical theocrats? I don't know if I would say that.
No. I mean, very specific. I'm talking specifically about very, very religious people. I'm not talking about, you know, one of my coworker from my job who's like Muslim.
Norms. Yeah. There's cultural norms, and I think amongst most Muslims in general, the majority, anywhere in the globe, are going to probably be less hospitable to this stuff than even Christians for the most part. But that's okay.
And they're wrong for that. I have no problem saying they're wrong for that.
They're not wrong. Well, how are they? Who are you to say what they're wrong to do?
Well, you know, being opposing yourself to somebody's simple identity, like their entire existence, I think is wrong. I think that's wrong. I have no problem with people having critiques of others and of others' views, but simply, you know, opposing somebody for the base identity that they are.
You're familiar with that case in Dearborn, right? Where the parents of the kids were objecting to, I mean, a very unnecessarily sexual book in a public school. It's very weird. I mean, if you look at the contents of the book, it didn't even seem very educational. It's like giving the book was written for was presumably a child audience, especially because these books are in the, I think, was it middle school maybe or elementary school? I'm not sure. Probably middle school. Could have been younger, but it was like the book had sections like, oh, this is how you do online dating or something. It's like, hang on a second, you have to be 18 to use those apps in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not a. Libraries are very different. Between the last time I stepped in a library, especially a like middle school library, but in a library setting, I would actually be pretty lenient towards a lot of stuff, mainly because libraries are educational hubs. That's kind of there is a point where
I draw the line when it comes to, well, I think I just draw the line when it comes to how to's on how to, engage in behavior meant for, adults, especially when it comes to sexual stuff. I don't know. I just think that,
I think
maybe
go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I think, if you read books and stuff, I mean, obviously there's going to be all sorts of objectionable content. I don't think that stuff should be messed with in any way, shape, or form, because it's fiction, and it's just artistic. You can make it the artist, make an argument for it on behalf of art, and that's not necessarily to say that art, just because it's art in and of itself, it has inherent value. I don't even believe that. But I think that when it comes down to the specific case in Dearborn, where there's some kind of instructional book on how to do online what does that have? Like, kids don't need that stuff.
I don't know if they need it, but I mean, if we're talking about especially kids these days, online dating is kind of seems to be a pretty frequent hub where the younger people of today meet each other. So I mean, maybe that's something that would be useful. I mean, back in my day, the argument was always about sex ed. Parents were upset about like sex ed happening, and I would make the same argument when it comes to sex ed, that I think kids being aware of that stuff can be positive.
You should see the book that the parents were raising the issue with. It wasn't just that. That's like one example, but there was like unnecessary sexual stuff in the book. It's just very kind of creepy, just on an intuitive level. Like, I don't need to make a, like, you could, if you were to look it up and you saw the contents of the book, you would raise your eyebrows. I don't even think that the most radical kind of leftist extremists could look at that book and say, this is all okay. Maybe some of them would.
I'm sure there are some that would. I haven't looked it up. I don't know exactly what book. I'm very lenient. It would have to be really out there. It would have to be very, 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 very much out there. But overall, I think, kids learning and understanding sex is good for their education. They can understand what sexual assault is. A lot of times sexual assault happens because kids don't understand what's happening to them. Teachers, parents, uncles, all those kind of weirdos will, kind of mess with kids, use different words, not explain to them what happens. And years later, you hear about, trauma that these adults have because they got, predated on.
But some of these things that, that get caught up in the news cycle, it's like, I'm wondering, why is it that who's introducing this stuff into the curriculum, and why is
not all books in every kid's library is part of the curriculum. They just stock books that they think could have educational value.
I think in this particular case, though, I think it actually, for some reason, I think it could have been part of the curriculum, because if it was just some random one-off book, like one copy that they just had in the school library, I don't think any of this would have happened. If I remember correctly, and I had to look it up again, I think that this book was part of the curriculum, hence the big controversy about it.
I mean, what was the class for? I'm assuming you're not going to know that detailed of a detail.
Apparently, it was enough for multiple parents to become outraged.
I mean, let's be honest. Parents aren't exactly known for not being outraged about stuff, right?
Even if that's the case, I just think that in this particular scenario, it's kind of like, I think parents should get some say in what their public schools are teaching their kids. It's not like they can just take their kid out of public school, because what happens if you do that? You can face criminal prosecution.
Oh yeah, so, take your kid to some private school and pay like $1 bazillion for the exact same result they're basically going to get from a public school.
Right. So but so if they're forced to send their kid to public school, it's like,
they have a right.
They have a right as a community to object to that, right? And
I mean, that's fine. Yeah, if a community, if a community is going in there saying, "Hey, we think this is too far," that's fine. I don't know the deep specifics of what you're talking about, but I think I tend to lean on the side of democracy. If a community comes together and is like, "Hey, this ain't it, chief," then that's fine. Then the school board should be taking that into account. But
of course they don't. They're not. They don't. They don't view themselves as being responsible to the public. Like,
I mean, they still get voted in. School board members are voted in.
Yeah.
We've seen campaigns for school board members getting booted.
Yeah, but
specifically by the right over nonsense.
It may be nonsense, but it's
and
like
panic.
If you start investing in these, I understand that people think, oh, maybe this is. I think if you look at it abstractly, like, well, gee, it's just it's just a boob or something. But then you have to take into account the fact that we're not like jellyfish. We all exist within a certain cultural context. So I don't. That's why I don't say like, oh, like Muslims are wrong for being against the LGBT or something. I mean, that's just part of their upbringing, and I think that that's just their cultural outlook. What am I going to do? Force them to accept it or something, or face some kind of penalty? Well, I mean, what is that? Then you become the asshole, right?
Well, I think it's kind of a conversation about limits. I have if someone is of the Muslim faith, which I worked with somebody who was like this, who had very anti gay views, I had no problem criticizing them and arguing with them. By no means do I think that until somebody is going to commit an illegal act, is there any need for any legal action? But certainly criticism, I don't think people are, just because you're from another culture doesn't mean I don't get to criticize you. I do think that some aspects of cultures are good and some aspects of cultures are bad. I think there's based on harm is probably where I would draw the line as to how you define what are bad and what are good across all cultures.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see I could see that being perhaps reasonable. I mean, even if I personally wouldn't, I don't know, view it that way, I could see how that's maybe a reasonable response. But then you have to understand that
it's like child marriages if there's like child marriages going on in another religion, you wouldn't abstain from arguing against that, right? Like that's not good.
I wouldn't accept that because we don't do that here in America, right?
Right. Yeah. Like you're coming at it from your own perspective, which sometimes is, sometimes I think judging other societies by your own standards isn't always the best way to go about it, but sometimes it is. I just think it kind of depends.
But see, the difference is that, because we're here, we have our culture in the United States. So I wouldn't accept that here because it's like you're here, you have to accept our sort of standards. And I think that, well, even just with that example, I don't think most predominantly Muslim countries don't even have that kind of stuff going on, by the way.
I mean, yeah, I didn't really say a specific one because I don't even think there's a high prevalence of child marriage anymore. I know in like Indian culture, families will pair off kids, but usually that's later on in life. Same with, a few other cultures kind of in the East. But I'm not saying anybody specific. I use that example abstractly.
I'm not going to go to India and start wagging my finger, right? Like I'm not.
I mean, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Right?
Depends on what I mean.
I'm not. You're not going to get the response you like, but like I think you have a right to oppose that.
I have my subjective view, but it's like that's over there. I'm not there. I don't engage with their culture. I think that there's a line you cross when you start trying to impose your cultural values onto other countries, and I think that we've actually, we've been seeing that since the George W. Bush regime when they were trying to export so-called democracy to Iraq, or
so-called is right.
Or the Obama State Department when it came to Libya, with Hillary Clinton there, and they always justify these things. And even just recently, I think Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton were just justifying these types of actions.
You're giving me like PTSD flashbacks to my childhood hearing Condoleezza Rice's name.
Well, she was just interviewed by Jon Stewart. He interviewed her and Hillary Clinton, and they justify their past decisions under the pretext of spreading
democracy.
Yeah, or individual freedom and that sort of thing. But that type of stuff is because there's no, first of all, there's no such thing as total individual freedom, not even in this country. So it's like, so these are bullshit reasons, but these are the reasons that they use, and this is kind of how they manufacture this sort of like, um, risk. This is how they get the public to go along with this stuff. And so I'm saying that the next wave of this type of stuff will be under the guise of like leftist language. And I think if you look at a lot of lefties, they kind of sound like the neocons did maybe 16 years ago or something.
So, are you under the impression that like the left is going to use the state to enforce I'm not even sure the pro LGBT like vocab to everybody?
I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. It could very
So,
easily
I think
happen that way.
I think what's kind of happening, and this is, I think a bit of what's happening is you are seeing a lot of people take a lot of stances very aggressively against, Tucker Carlson and people like that who've kind of made their career out of, opposing the drag stuff and historically opposing gay marriage and stuff like that. And what you're kind of seeing is people be a lot more open about their opposition to those very specific conservative values. And like, I feel like you're getting worried about, some leftist uprise. But like, as a leftist, I can tell you at the moment, there's not much of an uprise happening. Joe Biden is the president, and he's, fucking boring. Right. I mean, we would both agree he's rather fucking boring, right?
See, this could be a very long conversation because then I could respond to you and say that even if you think that there's no sort of actual leftist uprising, if you actually look at a lot of the cultural institutions that we have, or even academia, they all have basically like standardized the use of this type of kind of inclusivity buzzwords.
Well, do you think that came from the activists, or do you think that came from education first? Because I would argue it came from education, and then activists learned that vocab. Like, I know people who got humanities degrees and stuff who, that's the stuff that they learn. They learn about, people's identity and stuff.
Sure. But where did they go when they go through these institutions and they get jobs in sort of like, I guess you would say, they would, and first of all, they mostly just end up getting jobs in academia if they get humanities degrees, right?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Overall, leftists tend to be educators more often than conservatives.
Okay, but this goes on in the higher learning institutions nowadays. It doesn't matter if it's even Harvard or UC Berkeley. I mean, these are machines that churn out drones basically, and they end up in places as from finance to government positions. I mean, all these people go to these universities. That's what these universities are for, and that's the type of people that they're churning out. I think that the ultimate goal is not. I think you're saying that the leftist there's no leftist insurgency in this country. There doesn't need to be, because it's basically the language, and I think the worldview has already been more or less accepted by these types of elite circles. I mean, you look at who funds all these activist groups and NGOs, for example, right? Now, if I say George Soros,
you know what I'm going to say if you say George Soros, right?
Yeah. If I mention the Open Society Foundation, which is a real organization, which actually does have a paper trail that you can trace to NGOs and activist organizations, you'll get labeled anti-Semitic because you have to protect George Soros for God knows what reason.
Okay, so you understand why I said you know what I'm going to say about George Soros. Like, you understand why that's a dog whistle. Like, I'm sure you spend enough time on the internet, kind of the line that gets drawn, right?
But it's a real person.
And
they have a lot of money.
Right.
And
so
they use that money to fund
right. I mean, look, the problem with the Soros memeing isn't that it's incorrect that he has NGOs or that he has nonprofits that he funnels money to. That's not really like the problem. Like, even in it's really more of the unspoken assertion about George Soros and the general, like, I mean, we both know it's you say Soros, what you're saying is the elites. What you're saying when you say the elites is like the Jews. If you go far enough, you ask somebody, and then you start sounding like Kanye West right now. So it's just like, that's why I understand that that's not what you're saying, but like that is where that's going to end up leading, because you are using a dog whistle, whether you intend it to be that way. The people whose ears perk up for that are going to be, 4chaners who are on the Nazi boards over there. Like that's kind of why people are very weary of using that talking point. I just want to explain that. Like,
yeah,
I understand why you're defensive.
And this sort of reflexive defense of George Soros out of nowhere, just because he happens to be ethnically Jewish. I don't care about that. I'm mentioning him because he's an actor. He's an actual person who directly involves himself into politics.
Right. Do you think that's unique? There, we all know Murdoch. We all know Rupert Murdoch. We all know all these guys on the right. We all know that Ben Shapiro got a shit ton of money to start the Daily Wire and stuff.
Ben Shapiro has nowhere near the level of influence or power that George Soros does.
You don't think so?
I think
especially first of all, Murdoch is where I'd really argue with you on that one. Murdoch runs Fox News, the #1 rated news broadcast corporation.
No, I think you could say that. Yeah, of course, Rupert Murdoch.
Like right wing media is. Do you think right wing media is stronger than left wing media, or you think the opposite?
Absolutely not. No,
absolutely not.
Because there's only one. I mean, with the exception of maybe talk radio, I think most of the news networks tend to lean in favor of the Democratic Party and what their kind of narratives tend to be. I think Fox is like one exception, or maybe.
But Fox is also. Right. I mean, I would, while you're probably right, a lot more of the news broadcasters are going to be left leaning because, unfortunately, reality has a left leaning bias.
No, that's a ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. It's fine. But no, my point is you can look at CNN's numbers, you can look at MSNBC's numbers, you can look at NPR's numbers, you can look at everybody else's numbers. They pale in comparison to the amount of views, the amount of clicks Fox News is getting, the amount of interaction that the Daily Wire gets on their individual channels. Like
forcing those people to engage. It's not like they're being forced. They're organically engaging.
Well, yeah, but you could say the same thing about left-wing media. Then nobody's forcing anybody to watch left-wing media.
Yeah,
but more people are choosing to watch a lot of Fox News. Fox News is on everywhere. Yeah. You go to the airport, Fox News. You go to the bar, Fox News.
Sure,
you can't escape Fox News. And talk radio. You grew up in the 90s. You know how strong talk radio was. Talk radio was insane. My dad has not gotten off of talk radio yet. He still listens to Levin like 24/7, I'm pretty sure. Talk radio is a lot stronger than I think younger people give credit. So you should know that's not at all a small fish.
That's why I brought it up. But also, I think you have to acknowledge the fact that when I'm talking about this type of stuff, it's not just like the amount of people who engage with it. It's also just the fact that these groups, I think, have a lot of money. They have a lot of donors. CNN could have CNN's viewership could drop down to 5 people, and they would still be around. You know why?
But they wouldn't be nearly as influential.
It's not about that's the.
Well, we're talking about who's we were talking about who's stronger, though.
But I'm saying that they wouldn't disappear because these are basically these are very useful sort of media apparatuses for people with lots of money to keep afloat.
I mean, do you think? Go ahead.
CNN's viewership could be in the single digits and it wouldn't disappear. So I think that the influence and money involved here is a lot greater than just Rupert Murdoch and Fox News. That's like small potatoes compared to
Rupert Murdoch and small dude. Rupert Murdoch is not, and Fox News is not small compared to CNN. They outpace CNN.
Yeah, they're popular, but I'm saying the popularity is not the only driving factor in this stuff.
Well, yeah, but like when we're talking about who's influencing culture, because that's what we're talking about when we say kind of who's got larger influence, I would argue the right wing has a lot larger of an influence. That's why we're constantly arguing from their basically place of opposition.
I
You know,
think
nobody
that
was talking about any of this trans stuff. Nobody talks about CRT anymore. Do you not find that interesting? Nobody has mentioned. I don't even bother covering CRT stuff anymore because nobody talks about it, because Tucker Carlson stopped talking about it. Ben Shapiro stopped talking about it. All these guys stopped talking about it the minute the midterms happened, and now they're on to the next thing.
yeah, because
Like the right wing has always driven the news cycle.
These things are useful rhetorically, right, for a politician. And
Well, yeah,
all
it's
that
a good way to distract people.
I don't know.
It's also to buttress a little bit of a point about CNN. CNN recently like did a story about like I think the railway workers, and like failed to mention that. So apparently they mentioned that. Are you familiar with the railway strike that may or may not be happening coming up?
Yes.
So apparently, CNN did like their whole, regular ass coverage on it, and mentions that that basically the government can twist the arm of employees to basically accept whatever parameters of the deal that the corporations are going to be giving them, right? Basically framing it as, hey, it's the employees who are holding up all of our supply chain issues, right? When in actuality, the government has the ability to do that on both sides, but they actively chose to not mention that, hey, they could also twist the arm of these corporations and make them cooperate with employers, but they don't do that. Like I get what you mean in terms of CNN being a little bit more left-leaning, probably culturally, but I think we both can recognize that CNN, the minute you stop talking about transitions, and even then they're not that strong on them, and they're not that strong on those issues, they're all kind of working for the corporations. No,
Right.
They're rather centrist. They're not really that left.
Let me respond, because you brought up a lot of stuff.
I know. I'm sorry.
You bring up the stuff that you said. Well, you use the example of CNN not covering a workers' strike favorably, for example. Well,
For employers, yeah. For employees, yeah.
Sure. I don't think that leftism is inherently about necessary. See, all this stuff you talk about economics, that's like it's like secondary. That's downstream from culture. I think that unless you have to be able to have.
I would agree.
You have to have dominant cultural institutions and things like that. I mean, that's why even some of these people who sound like whack job leftists, I mean, they might be, I don't know. Like I remember like Kamala Harris or something, like, sometimes they sound woke, but then, when it comes to economic topics, they're not that much different.
No, because the woke stuff isn't really, it's not really important to her. All that stuff's window dressing.
That stuff is not. See, I think leftists go about this question wrong, because they're like, well, that's not, they don't really believe that stuff. That's just to like toss people a bone or something, man. And then I'm like, wait a second. Like, I think that they misunderstand this, because I think what it really comes down to is, first you need to establish some sort of social control. That's where all the cancellation stuff comes out of. And you need to be able to, you can't just have like a total anarchy. I think even the leftist, like elite people, they understand this stuff. So they
I mean, they certainly like the hierarchy.
Yeah, of course. So they need to enforce the sort of dominant leftist worldview, which we now live under. I mean, I don't think that I don't know how you could credibly argue that we're living under some kind of right-wing Christian male dominated society. Like, that's just not the way it is anymore. And you could argue, oh, maybe that's a bad thing, or maybe that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, we just don't even live it. We don't live under that anymore.
So I'm curious, like, what left wing, like, what left wing paradise are we living under? It certainly isn't my left wing. If it is, we neither have Medicare for all, we don't have college for all, we don't have a lot of these staples of leftist politics ever since, quite frankly, the Bernie campaign in 2016. That's kind of where I compare my leftist society that I'd want to see in America.
That was just stuff to dupe people, obviously. I mean, look at Bernie Sanders. He got totally screwed over in 2016.
Absolutely.
And then again in 2020, and all he did was basically herd all of his voters into the Democratic Party for his good friend Joe. I mean,
Yeah, that's
You know,
what
I
you
don't
do
know.
when it's you against somebody who's kind of a fascist.
That's not true. You can't be a cuck. You have to be a leader. You have to take risks, you know? Unless you're willing to roll the dice and enter into uncharted territory, how can you claim that you're fighting the establishment? Especially if you're telling people to vote for that establishment. So, you know, that's
I think it's one of those things of like recognizing the larger enemy. As much as I don't like Joe Biden, I would much prefer him than Donald Trump being in power at the moment.
Well, you could argue, you know, if you wanted to go down that road, you could just make the argument of, well, you can make a convincing argument that Trump would have been less evil than Biden, depending on how you want to go about it. So it's like, I just don't think these are. See, I think that's where a lot of leftists messed up, is that they were like, well, we just.
I mean, do you think he'd be able to handle this Ukraine situation, considering he was holding Ukraine over a barrel for over 8?
Do I think that Trump would have been better on the Ukraine thing? Honestly, yes, actually.
I mean,
yeah,
he clearly doesn't have a great relationship with Zelensky of all people, and he's been pretty skeptical about like the war in Ukraine and allowing them to defend themselves.
I think that even Biden himself is now having second thoughts about this Zelensky character because of the whole missile situation. And then I think Biden had to tell him to calm down. And there was also a report before that Zelensky was demanding more money, and Biden basically had to, you know, tell him to kind of, you know, settle down. Because
I mean, yeah, he needs to do that. I mean, if you're the leader of a country that's being invaded, you're going to, you know, you have your entire country that you're leveraging in your not debates, in your negotiations and stuff.
You know, I'm not willing to sacrifice livelihood or my bank account for Ukraine, and I'm certainly not in favor of you know, our tax dollars being just willy-nilly sent over there without any sort of roadmap or plan. I mean, this Biden guy is completely incompetent. You know, you look, he's not even calling for negotiations. I mean, the U.S. could easily stop all this.
As far as I understand, he has said that they need to begin to kind of, they have been kicking that around. I don't know if he said that like officially in like a press conference or anything, but I do know in the White House there's been talk of like there needs to be of kind of pushing more of peace paths. Yeah, obviously we're not privy to those negotiations. We should be though.
I don't know if you've seen this, but some of the most loudest and I think the most deranged voices that are in favor of continuing this conflict, as far as the U.S.'s involvement in it, tend to be from left-leaning people, which is very strange to me.
Oh yeah, I don't want the people of Ukraine to be invaded. That's, you know, I would certainly hope they don't want us to be invaded.
I think just from a more pragmatic standpoint, it's that the U.S. holds the leverage when it comes to giving Ukraine weapons and egging them on to continue this conflict, versus saying, you know, okay, we're not going to send you any more money, and you guys cannot refuse to come to the negotiation table. And Russia's always been open to negotiations. I think it was back in either March or April, maybe. I think the Russians and the Ukrainian government had actually agreed to come to the table and start having some sort of discussions. And then Boris Johnson nixed it. You know, and you know, he's not an American, obviously, but I'm saying that, you know, the Western powers have sort of they have a vested interest in continuing the conflict, whether you want to say that's because of money laundering through Ukraine or enriching the military-industrial complex.
I would probably say it's the second one over the first one. You'd have to show me some real stiff evidence of money laundering going on. But certainly the military-industrial complex is having a great time with this war. And as much as a leftist, I'm not a fan of the military-industrial complex, they're going to make their money. And I'd rather them make their money off the backs of supplying Ukrainians so they can defend their sovereign land. That's just kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very naive sort of view, because it's like you're looking at it from a very idealistic standpoint, like, oh, this is like a noble cause, and this and that. But there's been
is defending one's country not noble? I think that's noble.
Not with my tax dollars, for one thing. It's not my nation. I don't give a shit about Ukraine.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. The United States is funding this mainly because they want to weaken Russia, which helps our, you know, that's what our geopolitical goal is, and
I think that
seems like Ukraine is a good vehicle for that.
Geopolitically, that could be suicide, and I think that it's important to recognize that, which a lot of people on the left refuse to recognize because of their idealism. That's basically, leftism is not based on pragmatism; it's more so based on like idealism. Like, we want this ideal state of being, and of course, reality doesn't function that way. So when you have people with that type of worldview and they encounter a situation like with Ukraine, what happens? Idealism trumps pragmatism. And so you have people out there saying, who gives a shit? You know, you look at some of these liberal or left-leaning publications, and they're publishing articles saying, well, maybe nuclear war is not so bad. right? And to me, that was like that's insanity. But for some reason, some people on the left accept this. I don't know why, but
I mean, I'm
that's
sure there
where
are
we're
some
at.
people that think that nuclear war isn't really as possible as I think others might. I tend to think it's a bit 50-50. I can't speak for all of the left. I don't know. We've kind of seen the pants fall off of Russia in terms of their actual capabilities to be a military force. They've kind of revealed themselves to be a little bit lower of a power level than I think we all kind of thought they would be. But I mean, we talked about you talked about pragmatism, but like the thing that you're arguing, that if we pooled aid and then pushed Ukraine into negotiations with Russia, well, you have to recognize that the leverage is now wildly swung in Russia's favor, which Russia's only their negotiations start and end with keeping the land that they've annexed, and Ukraine's is pushing them all the way back. If Ukraine pushes them out of their country, we get some kind of demilitarized zone in between the two of them. I'm perfectly happy with that, because I want Ukraine to reclaim the land that has always been theirs, that was taken from them by Russia, and I want Russia to stop their attempt at invading. That's it. Anything farther, Russia always tries to do this. Oh, maybe Ukraine's gonna try to invade us or any of this nonsense. None of that is happening. Once that happens, then we can have that conversation of like, all right, now that the pieces are back to where they should be, now we can pull aid. But it doesn't seem like we're not quite at that point yet.
Well, I would have to dispute some of your assertions, especially when it comes to Russia's military capabilities. I've heard conflicting things regarding this, and it's hard to trust the Western media at this point because of the fact.
I mean, it's just they haven't had a great track record against Ukraine. That regardless of news coverage,
the media has lied so much about it that I don't think it's hard for me to take any sort of. I don't take any statements at face value, but especially some of these outrageous claims by the Western media is putting us all at risk. I think even, and it's like I said, I think earlier in our conversation, I brought up that story with the Associated Press, and all these journalists and outlets immediately jumped to the conclusion that it had to be Russia, right?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, wartime journalism is hard.
Missiles into Poland, killing some people. That was
right.
From Ukraine.
Yeah.
So, and I think that when it comes down to this type of conflict, what you want to do is you want to use every method in your power to bring peace, not to perpetuate the conflict. It's not,
I mean, I don't think the left is perpetuating a conflict so much as there's a certain amount of, I think, defense and conflict that's warranted for this. At the end of the day, Russia could end this at any time by turning the fuck around. Like, this is rather simple.
You guys say that. That's just not how reality works. I think that ultimately we'll see what happens. Ultimately, we'll see what happens. But I think that the way that it's going now, especially with winter already here, I think maybe we'll see.
God, I would not want to be those soldiers over there during this time of year.
We'll see whose fortunes change. But as far as I can tell, I think that it's safe to say that the Ukrainian side will have to give something up, and maybe the Russian side will have to give something up. But it's better to have peace, and I think a lot of the leftist voices are saying no, we need war because we're bloodthirsty. And
I mean, as a leftist, mine is nobody gives up anything. Russia keeps their land, Ukraine keeps their land. That's my outcome. Like I can't speak for all leftists, and I won't claim to, but at the very least, for me and for some people that I know, for the most part, it's Ukraine gets their land, Russia gets theirs, they go back to their borders. Everyone walks away from this. Nobody gains or loses anything, really.
Well, you can't even have that. Even that outcome is unrealistic until the U.S. Because aid is not indefinite. By the way, there is going to have to be a time where whoever's in charge of the government has to say, okay, wait.
Right, so and we have the resources to last longer than Russia. Would be the left's argument probably is that we have, Russia's not going to have the assets to keep their military machine running long enough, and mostly this is a clock game. You run the clock out until eventually Russia can't continue to fight, and then they go back to their borders. Ukraine goes back to theirs. That's in my mind, the most, while, as much as I'd love everybody to put their guns down now, everyone agrees, that's most likely what it's going to come down to is Russia's not going to be able to continue. We've already seen soldiers being conscripted in Russia and fighting back against, I think I saw like a video of like a general or like, whoever signs people up for that sort of stuff. And they like killed the guy and just ran off. I think they got caught later, but like, obviously the Russian citizens aren't super thrilled about any of this either. This isn't really going their way. This isn't paying off the way that they thought it was.
Yeah, and I think you look at the maybe if that could be the case, and I think if you look at the Ukrainian side, it's not going exactly the way they wanted to either.
I don't think they wanted to get invaded either. So unfortunately, nothing seems to be going their way.
Well, this conflict could have been avoided a number of times. I mean, even going back as far as 2014, I think that there were certain things introduced that could have prevented this conflict, but NATO wanted to keep pushing to Russia's border, and people were warning for years that this type of scenario could happen, and then it did. And nobody. They're
a defensive pact. They're allowed.
What's that?
I said NATO's a defensive pact. They're allowed. They're allowed to make friends.
I think that it's not just a friend-making organization; it's a military alliance whose express goal was to push.
It's a defensive military alliance. Let's be clear.
What's that?
It's a explicitly defensive military alliance.
Its stated purpose when it was founded was to push back against the USSR. I think that was the reason why this entire thing began. There's no more USSR, so I don't see what the need for NATO is. But it's interesting that the left nowadays is taking the side of the military
the non quote unquote communist group in that conflict.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that's what the left is nowadays. They've
well, it's mainly because Russia is a fascist state. That's why they're like a fascist dictatorship. So
they're not a fascist dictatorship. I think this is again an issue is that a lot of leftists will call everything fascist. This is fascist. That's fascist. I think what it comes down to is leftists they just don't like strong governments or people who actually get work done. I think Putin's gotten a lot done, especially after the chaos of the 90s. Russia was a war zone in the 90s, and this guy comes in and says, I'm going to turn things around. That's why he's a fascist because of it. But a leftist wouldn't bat an eye. If Russia was still an impoverished hellhole like it was in the 90s, I don't think leftists would give a shit because they don't, again, I don't think that, I don't view leftism as like a noble kind of worldview or anything. And I don't think it's even about altruism at all.
I mean, mostly a lot of leftists would probably state that their goals are more towards egalitarian societies for the most part.
Yeah, idealism, right? I get that. So the way, but I find.
I think egalitarianism is at least a goal towards egalitarianism is necessary. As I think a species, we wouldn't have progressed unless we came together and wanted better for more and more people every century.
Sure, but I just think that the irony of the defense of NATO, it's too rich. I'm sorry, it's just funny to me.
I mean, it's again, this is one of those recognizing your enemies from your allies and not getting what's the word hung up on labels and stuff. Well, I think at the end of the day, NATO is doing what's in the best interest of the working class of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. And that's at least where I align myself is with working people and defending their own land.
I don't agree with that because Ukraine's a very corrupt country. And I think that if you want to start throwing out...
I mean, the U.S. is incredibly corrupt, but if we were being invaded, I would still...
Let me get to that. I think that it's very amusing, at least from my perspective, that you say that you call Russia a fascist state, but you're not willing to apply that term to Ukraine, a country which is certainly not welcoming of the LGBT, let alone even minority groups. I mean, we all saw the footage of those blacks being basically sent over to Poland from Ukraine when the war started. They didn't want these, or even just the policies of the Zelensky regime. I mean, they were banning, I think, 12 or so political parties under the guise that they were Russian collaborators.
Well, yeah, they're Russian collaborators. You have to excise that sort of thing during wartime.
You'll have to excuse me, but I'm old enough to remember the War on Terror, where people who voiced any sort of dissent against the Iraq War were labeled traitors. So
the difference is being opposed to the Iraq War was a good thing. That would be the difference.
you have no way to verify whether or not these political parties had any sort of sympathy to Russia or not. You're just taking their word at face value. And so, but even if that was the case, even if, first of all, it's not a crime to be sympathetic towards one side or another. I mean, presumably, right? In a democracy, you have the right to an opinion, which you don't have. But you make the excuse that it's okay to ban not one, not two, but I think it was over 10 political parties. I mean, how is it possible that they were all quote unquote Russian sympathizers? But even if that's the case, even if you accept that that was an okay thing to do, you can no longer claim that's a democracy. And it didn't just stop at political parties. It was also news networks, media outlets, journalists have been arrested in Ukraine. This is not a democracy, even by your definition.
Right. So mostly I would say that, let me synthesize what you just said. Just give me 2 seconds. Mostly what I would say is if you're banning political parties that are actively organizing and, spreading pro-invasionist propaganda and like, kind of pushing more of that movement, I do think that that's, you do a democracy to function cannot allow anti-democratic groups to take power.
Again, first of all, by the way, I think all of those left-wing parties in Ukraine are banned now, by the way. So it's just
maybe
ironic.
I'm not an expert on Ukraine at all, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you should look into it. All of them are banned. All of the left-wing opposition parties in Ukraine are banned, amongst others. But it's interesting.
I mean, were they supporting Russia?
What does that mean? Like, how do you prove that? You can just say that they were.
Well, it just depends on if their rhetoric is in line with Russian propaganda and with Russian talking points.
First of all, no. Even if what you call Russian propaganda or something, first of all, in a democracy, that should be allowed. We have the freedom to advocate for anything we want in this country politically, right? Or do you just agree with the sort of Bush doctrine?
Well,
you're against us. I mean, you have to make a choice here.
Right.
It's like you can't have it both ways. You can't just have your cake and eat it too. You have to either accept the fact that it's a totalitarian state, which is exerting a level of control that you wouldn't accept in this country, or I guess you can try to make excuses for it. It's up to you.
Well, it's simply the case. I would simply make the argument that in any democracy, you cannot have groups, political organizations attempt to take power over your democracy with no intent to actually participate after the fact. Anti-democratic groups, a democracy cannot simply let anti-democratic groups gain enough power to then take over and then expel democracy. Okay. If there is a group, if there is a political organization within Ukraine pushing for the pushing pro-Ukrainian propaganda, pushing for invasionist rhetoric, and trying to influence people in a positive direction towards their own invasion of their country, then I think that would be a democratic government's job to stamp that out, to arrest those people and make sure that they do not hand over their democracy to an invading force.
I get your argument. Okay,
yeah.
So here,
there is a line. There is a certain amount of defense that a democracy needs that's outside of the electoral and like voting half of defending democracy. Defending democracy isn't really something.
So you
go ahead.
You accept a level of totalitarian control that goes beyond sort of what you would call the democratic process, like elections, things like that. Great. I'm glad you admit that, because you people very seldom do admit this. But it's interesting because what if I applied the same logic?
Well, I mean, if somebody wants to run against Zelensky, that's perfectly fine. They just can't be anti-democracy.
Yeah, perfect. Right. So you can.
Democracy is not negotiable.
There's no trial for this stuff. You just label people. What if Republicans labeled all opposition as being seditious?
I mean, they already do. Wait, they already do. That already happens. You and I both know that already happens.
Very few.
No, come on, dude. No, that's not. No, we both know about Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of her rhetoric about Pelosi and everything else. Same with Lauren Boebert. Same with Matt Gaetz. Same with a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys will push seditious rhetoric. There's a reason
In the
why
example
January
of
6th
March,
happened and why those people felt
example-
motivated to
Sure.
take part in that riot, because they believed that there were very specific Democratic or Democrat representatives that had already committed acts of sedition. There are already people in our government.
I want to be able to respond to at least one of those examples you brought up.
Right.
Because the example of Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's been censured by her own party. She's essentially powerless. And
She's like the biggest the biggest fundraiser. I mean,
What does
yes,
that
she did
have-
get censured, but at the end of the day, she's pulling in the most amount of money and going to be peddling the most amount of influence in that party. They haven't denounced her. They simply sat her aside.
Politically powerless. Yes, she's politically powerless. She has no way to make any.
You think she's politically powerless, but she's the biggest money fundraiser?
Do you understand what it means to be stripped of your committee assignments?
I understand that, but I don't think her power comes from any of her ability to be on committee assignments. Her power comes through her influence on social media and the way she wields her audience, which is quite a large bit of the base of the Republican Party.
Saying that she's good for Republicans' donation drives, but see now, what does that have to do with the original topic, which is the fact that you can label your opposition anything you'd like?
I mean, dude, we're like way off the original topic, which I don't mind.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out.
In the context of Ukraine, I think that maybe if they labeled one opposition party that way, okay, maybe, right? More than 10, how is that possible? And so
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, there are like a bajillion, political parties in America. I think 10 is a pretty small drop in the bucket compared to how many political parties you can start.
Yeah,
Just on the left, there's probably 10 in each state.
I think you should be able to start any political organization or
I
party
agree.
you want in
I
this
agree.
country.
As long as it's not
But that's
anti-democratic.
But that's not how it is in Ukraine, though. So it's not a democracy.
Right, because it's the democracy for parties that respect democracy, parties that aren't invasionist. That's like kind of the line they've drawn, which I'm perfectly fine with.
Why do you take their claim at face value? Why do you even trust them?
Because they have they've been pretty good about that issue.
But they
I haven't seen personally. I haven't seen any evidence that any of these parties aren't invasionist parties.
I'll just give you one example.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know? Okay, less than a week ago, Zelensky was insisting, despite the claims of Poland's PM, despite the claims of the UN's findings, that it was Russia who sent that missile. And we both know that that's not true. We've already established that earlier. And yet Zelensky was insisting that it is. So what else do they lie about?
I mean, governments lie. I don't have a specific answer for that. Where's my mouse? My mouse isn't working.
Is it possible that they're lying by stating
There it
that
is.
parties are somehow pro-Russian operatives? Is that a possibility?
Zelensky. Give me 1 second. I'm going to actually Google this because now I'm interested. Let's see. Missile Poland. Let's see. Poland likely aimed at NATO. Let's see. If I click on Eurasian Times, are you going to trust what I read?
Just, get to the relevant portion.
I mean, I'm just curious. I haven't clicked on it yet, so I'm just.
I don't know.
Let's see. On November 15th, a missile struck the village of in Poland near Ukraine's border, killing 2 citizens. Yeah. Following the missile strike, okay. Let's take a look. Following the missile strike in its territory, Polish president. Oh God, what are these names? Article 4 NATO Charter. Russian Ministry of Defense. Later November. Zelensky adamant on blaming Russia. Here we go. Partial reaction, however, didn't stop Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky from blaming Russia for the incident in this nightly video addresses. In the day, he said that Russian missiles hit Poland and described the incident as an infringement upon collective security and a significant escalation, refuting the Ukrainian claim on the 16th, stated that the footage of the wreckage detected by type of missile, cool, it's an S whatever, Polish president, highly probable that the missile was launched by Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense. From the information that we and our allies have, it was an S-3000, made in the Soviet Union, an old rocket, no evidence that the Russian site launched. However, Zelensky refuted Polish claim. It insisted that the missile was not Ukrainian. I do not doubt that it was our missile or our missile strike, Zelensky told Ukrainian news outlets, adding, I want us to be fair, and it was the use of our air defense that I want that evidence. Okay. So he still believes that it was their air defense, I guess. Because I think, wasn't it like they were trying to shoot down another missile, and then
Their
in
missiles
that
still-
process,
their missiles ended up landing in a.
right? Yeah. Let's see.
Okay.
Is there anything else that's? Yeah. It seems like he doesn't have the full history, but yeah. I mean, if he's
liar. It was immediately after that happened, he was proclaiming that it was Russia, and everybody took
right,
it at
because
face value.
I mean, again, wartime journalism isn't exactly a hard science
They're
here,
not
but
journalists,
yeah.
they're stenographers. There's a difference, but yes.
Well, no, I mean, I would say, you know, if he read that story and he didn't have the information, I would also kind of assume that it was Russia. But it seems like he's pretty open to like, hey, if it was us, then show me the evidence and that's fine.
No, this is not. You
I
can't
mean,
just
look.
assume- When you're talking about triggering Article 5, okay, I'm sorry, but you can't just have a hunch.
Right. But like, again, we haven't started World War III over this. I think this is pretty much settled, no?
For the time being, I don't know
Right.
what's going to happen next, but things like the events like this don't really lead me to trust the Zelensky regime over there. Especially, and the fact that my tax dollars are going over there. I think I have a say.
I mean, this one thing makes you not trust the Zelensky administration, but you trust the Putin administration?
Oh, of course, multiple things make me distrust them, but this is like the
Right.
cherry on top.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, you know, you were fawning over like Vladimir Putin a bit. I mean, I did
I
like.
wasn't fawning over him. I simply stated facts that Russia.
I mean, you said he was getting stuff done. You were being a bit flowery with your words.
Russia came out of the economic chaos of the 90s through Putin and through his economic policies that sort of reinvigorated their economy. I don't think you can argue, even if you don't like him, you have to still admit that. That's not
I mean, I wouldn't say Russia's economy is exactly booming. Even before it got like dropped to its knees by all of the
claim I made is that
what's it called? Is that it's? I'm sure it's improved. Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. It's improved.
The aftermath of the 1990s.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that.
You know, the average life expectancy fell after the Soviet Union collapsed, and after prostitution and murders. You know, there used to be no.
Yeah, the USSR was cringe.
Huh?
I said the USSR was cringe. So
I don't know what you mean by that. I just know that after it ended, there was a big turmoil for about a decade or more now. I mean, until Putin came in, he kind of nationalized some industry, and they were able to kind of crawl.
I like nationalizing industries. I said I like nationalizing industries. I think we should nationalize the medical industry in America.
Whatever. I mean, I'm just giving you the facts when it comes down to it. Because I think when people will talk about Putin, they want to foam at the mouth. He's an evil fascist dictator. I don't have the patience for hyperbole or anything. I just want to get down on facts. And when we look at the facts, I mean, I think that it's clear that Ukraine is not this beacon of democracy that people are trying to sell us. Okay,
right?
If you look at where the country was before the conflict started, and certainly where it is now, there's no argument that it's a democracy unless you accept wartime conditions as an excuse for clamping down on sort of any sort of democratic freedoms. And if you're okay,
I mean,
with
that does kind of tend to happen.
Yeah,
like wartime kind of does tend to do that.
Okay,
that's something that I am a little bit more lenient towards. But also a lot of the corruption that like occurs in Ukraine has been because of Russian involvement. No,
there's people in Ukraine, believe it or not, that are pro-Russian. Some are pro-Ukrainian.
I mean, that's fine. They can move to Russia then if they're pro-Russian.
Okay, if you're pro any country, how about you just leave the United States? Oh,
that's everyone has that. I think people have that freedom. People who want to live in Russia have the freedom and the right to move to Russia. Yeah. They do not have the freedom and the right to have Russia invade another sovereign country. Like this is still like an invasion of a sovereign nation. I want
to apply your logic here.
Mm-hmm.
So why not? What's your ethnic background?
I'm sorry?
What's your ethnic background?
I would say American, but technically, if you want to get very technical, I'm Paraguayan.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Paraguay, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Why should I care? Obviously, your sympathies must lie with Paraguay somewhere. What are you doing here? Go back to Paraguay. I mean, I'm just, it's like these types of arguments.
I mean, if I wanted to live in Paraguay, then I would go live there, but I don't. I live in America, and I like America.
And Ukrainian and Russian culture is very interlinked. So, of course, there's going to be people in Ukraine who have pro-Russian sympathies. Duh.
Well,
do you
yeah,
mean?
but these are again these are sovereign nations. If you want to live in Russia, go live in Russia. But like, no amount of people who are pro
you remind
Russia
me of, like,
who live in Ukraine, that's not a justification for
you
Russia
sound like
invading another sovereign
sound like a-
nation. It's
you
just
sound like a Rush. You sound like Rush Limbaugh. Oh, if you don't like the fact that we're waging war in Iraq, that you can move to China or something. It's like this is the level of argumentation.
no. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm simply saying that if you personally would rather live somewhere else, you may go do that. That's all. And that an invasion by the nation that you prefer should not be justified through your preference. That's all I'm saying. If I really liked Canada, if I was a big Canadian fan, and I said, "Hey, I think Canada should invade America because I want more Canada in my America," you would say, "Why don't you just move to Canada?" Right?
But nobody is saying that. My only point was that there was people within Ukraine that wanted to have maybe a more beneficial or peaceful relationship with their Russian neighbor. There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I am sure, but that's not the argument that like Vladimir Putin used to invade. His explicit argument was that there were Russians who want to be part of Russia but not leave Ukraine for some odd reason. So he decided to invade. Like that. Like that's the justification that he used. So
even that line of reasoning is enough to get you labeled as a pro-Russian traitor or something. I mean, there are people. The Ukrainian government was killing its own people in the Donbass, for example. I mean, they had those pro-Nazi militias and everything. I mean,
I've heard a bit about the what are they called? It's something battalion.
The Azov battalion.
Yes, thank you.
2 steps away from having a swastika. It has a black sun. It has that strange looking like kind of.
Yeah, they're cringe.
It almost kind of just looks like a straight up swastika.
Yeah, I mean they're very cringy. Yeah, LARPers. Not a fan.
What do you mean LARPers? They're given U.S. weaponry.
I mean, when I say LARPers, I mean all Nazis are LARPers. I just mean anybody who's kind of Nazi and Nazi adjacent is a LARPer.
No, they're following what do you mean LARPing?
I mean, like you're like the Nazi ideology of like the Ubermensch and all the rest of that stuff. You're like LARPing this weird like Uberman thing.
Go listen to what they themselves have said. I mean, they talk about what is it? They see themselves as like the inheritors of the legacy of like Stefan Bandera. As a Nazi collaborator.
Yeah, I don't support any of that.
I mean, just look at their own words, though. I mean, it's amazing to me that people will deny this stuff because I remember publications like even The Guardian, only of like 3 years ago, we're running articles saying, hey, a lot of U.S. money and weaponry is ending up in the hands of these strange extremist nationalist groups in Ukraine. I mean,
we have a lot of guns.
Alarm bells. Huh?
I said we have a lot of guns that go a lot around the world a lot.
Yeah, but people were specifically sounding the alarm bells about this specific issue.
Yeah,
for years.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's something that I wouldn't support, and something that like I don't want people like that getting weapons. But if they're going to get weapons by the nature of being in the area where there's a war zone, there's not really a whole lot you can do about that.
The weapons were ending up in their hands prior to this conflict. Years before even.
Right, and I don't support that.
Okay, neither do I. Perfect. So I don't want my money going there. That's all. That's as an American, I'm not even like picking a side here. I'm just saying I don't want my money to enable any of this shit.
Right. I mean, I don't like where our money goes regardless. I would only argue that, weapons ending up in the hands of the Azov battalion during this wartime conflict is, while not my favorite thing and unfortunate, it's just kind of the thing is the Azov battalion is not officially sanctioned by the Ukrainian government. Now, do I think the Ukrainian government is probably handing some of those weapons off to the Azov battalion to fight Russians? Absolutely they're doing that, but that's again to fight the overall goal of sovereignty for Ukraine, which I support. In this only moment, am I okay with the Azov battalion getting weapons so that they can go die and fight Russian invaders? That's the only time.
They're the prime fighting force at this point. They are
the prime fighting force.
most of the videos and photos that you're going to see coming out of the conflict are photos of people with Azov battalion.
I mean, is most photos all people? Is most photos most people?
You're just sort of making a tenuous point by trying to cast doubt.
I just think you're extrapolating that a little bit farther than it needs to be.
I'm not extrapolating more than I need to. I mean, even the media itself, for some reason, has a problem with displaying people doing Nazi salutes and having Totenkopf on their uniforms. And it's
they have Nazi salutes on CNN. People are doing Nazi salutes on CNN.
They were videoing a celebratory parade after a Kherson or something like that, and there was somebody straight up giving a Sieg Heil. I think they pulled that footage or something. And
wait, how many people?
Out of how many people?
Well, you said somebody, so I'm curious. You're only that's like one guy. As much as I don't like that personal guy,
I'm going to go down the line and give you multiple examples right now. I mean, or even just it's not just the Azov Battalion. There's also other groups like the right sector. There are the political arms of these paramilitary groups that have actual representation in the government. And I think just recently there was controversy because the Greeks are very anti-Nazi, and there was controversy because Zelensky happened to visit, I think it was Greek parliament or something, and one of the people that came in tow with him was one of these Azov Battalion neo-Nazis, and the Greeks threw a fit over it. It was very controversial.
As they should.
This is stuff that is not this for some reason. Despite the claim that Azov is somehow just some obscure minority battalion, for some reason they keep popping up in all of these photo ops and meetings, and for some reason they just keep popping up. So it's very it's the explanation that there's some fringe minority is not convincing at this point, especially when they're being photographed with the head of state. Come on.
Right. I mean, again, you can take pictures of people in war zones in a lot of different places. I'm not going to pretend to have any kind of deep knowledge of their of their spread around the country, but I'm perfectly confident with saying that they're, most Ukrainians are not Azov adjacent.
I never made that claim, but tell me, is the Greek Parliament a war zone?
Is the Greek Parliament a war zone? No.
Oh, so what? Okay, so what was the? I don't understand the justice.
Well, no, I was talking about all the other pictures. The one I already said that's bad. If he showed up in Greek Parliament, that's not a good thing.
Okay, but why is this happening in the first place?
Probably because they're an imperfect country, the same way there's Nazis in America.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I mean, there's quite a bit of Republicans who are seen. What's the word?
When Joe Biden
yucking around with like Nazi and far right nationalists, but
So when Joe Biden visits another country, does he bring a hooded Klansman in tow with him?
No, but when Donald Trump certainly does, I'm sure he brings people who wouldn't be too far from wearing hooded Klan robes.
Okay, I'm just saying that this is I'm trying to compare the two situations. As you're saying, well, there are Republican politicians with some tenuous links to some fringe right-wing figures. Yeah, guess what? Those people are not even in power. We don't have a neo-Nazi battalion that's part of the American military. You know that.
Oh, right? Yeah, and Ukraine doesn't have a neo-Nazi part of their military, technically.
Azov battalion is officially incorporated.
Technically. Is it really? I'd be interested to learn that.
It's officially incorporated into the country's military, yes. This is not even a controversial statement. You can look that up right now if you want to.
I will not, because I want us to get back to the original topic we were talking about. But I've been enjoying this tangent to Ukraine. I don't spend too much time on foreign politics, mainly because I'm not a big foreign politics guy.
You have to. This is my problem with the left, because you guys are...
No, I know. No, I'm well aware. I've only been doing this for like a couple weeks now, and I already have like a full-time job, so I do what I can. I try to learn as much as I possibly can. So
see, that's what I'm saying. The conservatives and the independents, they're going to wage the real revolution in this country because they're anti-war, they hate taxes, they're anti-establishment. They got their nuts hanging out. They're not afraid to be men. Leftists are like, well, I have to support Ukraine, and I'm not sure what gender I am, and it's like that's back up away from me with all that. That's kind of how I think of that.
You're a very interesting person. You know that?
Why is that?
Just you're interesting to talk to.
Oh, okay.
Just the stuff you say. Just
Well, I
very
appreciate
interesting. There's like so much you just said, but like we've already been going for, God, what the stream has been running for 2 hours and 45, and I think we've been talking for an hour and 50 of it, maybe, or something like that. But
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll let you go because I actually do have to go. But
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to come back and debate any topic again with sources and statistics and
Right.
facts and all that type of nerdy stuff that a lot of people love to bring up. I'm
Can
just
I-
doing this off the top of my head.
Before you leave, can I have you do like a little thought experiment thing? I've been kind of workshopping out in the real world.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So how do you feel about like, you mentioned the gender stuff, and I'm only gonna ask you this because you mentioned the like gender stuff. How do you feel about like kind of the gender questions and like how people identify?
I think that what do you mean? Like people who identify as a Zim, Zer kind of thing? That's stupid.
Right. We're gonna forget about that for a minute. I just mean about gender identity. What's your perspective on gender identity? Like, do you feel like it's tied to your sexuality, or do you feel like they're separate as
I think
most? Go ahead.
I remember, it's funny. I have a way of answering this question that's kind of maybe a little different than what you've heard.
Ooh, I love different.
I remember some years back I read this like article from one of these like kind of 40-year-old cougar type of women or something that were like complaining that men these days, they don't even know if they're men until they read a sociological study telling them that they're men. I think that's kind of where we're at. It's like, no, what, these things are just intuitive. We've survived for thousands of years just knowing this type of stuff, but it's like all that stuff is like cast into question now, and it's like, I don't think you know that women, they don't actually like when men act like that, or they don't find it attractive. I think it's they don't like pussies usually. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some exceptions.
I mean, I've definitely met some women that do like pussy.
Sure, yeah, with another woman, but not somebody who identifies.
Right? No. I've met some women with some weak-ish men. It's interesting, at least from my perspective.
Even if they're with them, they're not turned on by that. They actually find them like it's like on a primal level. They don't.
I find it, I guess, I find it really interesting. You're making a lot of very like intuitive, I think, observations and kind of.
There's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but I think in general that's kind of tends to be the dominant pattern.
Right. So, do you think that?
But that's just all this stuff. That's where all this stuff stems from. Guys
I mean, yeah. I mean, do you think gender is it like my overall question is if you think gender is based on your sexuality or your basically your bits down there, or do you think that gender is more of a social construct? Because that seems to be also a big part of the argument that I've heard people.
I don't think it's a social construct.
You don't think it's a social construct?
No, because if you look around the world, and you look at all the different cultures, they all have. I mean, for the most part, even across all these various cultures, all throughout the hundreds of years, I mean, you can find commonalities between one culture that's separated by like 25,000 miles. It's like there's still like these accepted sort of roles that are not called into question, and you could say, oh, these are just traditional male gender roles, but it's like, well, how did all of these cultures, disparate cultures around the globe, develop in fairly similar ways? So I think that it is biological on that level, yes.
Okay, so the thought experiment that I mentioned. So I'm at the top of a hill. It's a really snowy day here in Colorado. I begin to ball up a snowball. I roll it down this massive hill, right? I head my ass back up that hill, but not quite as high. Grab me another ball, roll it all the way down. I do that one more time, only at the lower half of the mountain. Stack all three of these snowballs, giant, big, fucking huge snowballs. Stack them all, largest one at the bottom, middle-sized one on the middle, smallest one on the top. I put a top hat on, grab some sticks, throw some sticks on both ends of the middle snowball. I grab, I don't know, some mud. Some people use clay, or not clay, coal back in the day. I don't know anybody who has access to coal anymore. But let's say there's a coal pile nearby. I go grab some. I put some little eyes, put a little smiley face. What did I just describe making?
Are you talking about a snowman or something?
Yes, actually. I was talking about a snowman. Now, the reason I bring up snowmen is, why are they snowmen? There is no penis, and there's nothing biological about it.
I don't know what the what is the point of this?
Well, gender being a social construct would mean that it is based on social norms and social biases. Meaning, if you put a top hat, if you stack 3 snowballs in order on top of each other and put a top hat on them in a face, that becomes suddenly a snowman. But there's nothing about that snow construction that you've just made that has anything to do with being a man. Wearing top hats isn't about being a man. Having coal for eyes or a smile.
I understand your example. I just don't know I don't know how anthropomorphizing an inanimate object in any way.
Well, my point, yeah, my point is that a lot of times we talk about men as if it's, and I mean a lot of conservatives talk about men as if it's something biological, that being a man has anything to do with having a penis. But we both know, you and I both know, that being a man has almost nothing to do with having a penis. I've met unmanly men who have penises. I've met women who are more men without penises.
They were still
like my point being in this is that every day we refer to manhood, and especially in right-wing circles when you hear them talk about men and the difference between men and real men, every day you hear and you participate in manhood being a social construct. You just might not have noticed it. That's more my point. And I like to illustrate that using that fun example. Thought about it randomly, like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I just think maybe, I don't know, maybe a better example might be more useful. Kind of get what you're driving at. I just think that even just outside of the US's current cultural climate, I think that, you'll find that social views on what men are more or less the same across cultures. And it has something to do with the evangelical right or whatever boogeyman the left has nowadays. I think that this is a sort of topic that can
Well, yeah, but if it's cultural, doesn't that mean it's socially constructed? That wouldn't be biological.
Yeah, but I think that if you deny the biological realities of manhood,
I mean, what are the biological realities of manhood then?
Penis, testicles, sperm.
So if you don't have those things, so if you don't have testicles, you're not a man?
It's not just those examples. Like I said, higher bone density, hair in places that.
I mean, there are women with high bone density. Usually, they're athletes. Are they men now?
What's interesting about your question is that every time people bring this stuff up, the rebuttal is to bring up an exception that basically proves the rule, though, because that's why it's an exception. It's like, well, what about this fringe case of this random person?
Well, it's really more about I have an understanding of manhood that is rather fluid and rather easily changeable. Like, there are many different aspects and a lot of different
we're gonna have to work on that when I return.
Notifiers.
I would love to be able to continue this conversation. I really do have to go.
I think you're not anonymous.
And it was nice talking to you, but I'm gonna have to work on. Yeah, I'm gonna turn you into a right-wing killing machine next time I return. I'm gonna have some real. I'm gonna come prepared with with some good facts and figures and stuff for you. It's gonna change your worldview, I think.
I'm gonna. You're gonna. What do the kids say? Are you gonna black pill me? Is that what the kids say?
No,
We're both in our 30s.
Black
Do you
pill
understand any of it?
Black pill means hopelessness.
Oh no, you'll never do that to me.
Yeah, the red pill is the one I wake you up from the dream.
Oh right, because it's the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that should be fun.
Nice talking to you, though.
Yeah, it's been really nice. This is kind of the direction I've wanted for this channel. I really like talking with people and just asking questions. Just
Well,
that's the fun part.
It should be my channel after this conversation. Wrecked. No, I'm just joking.
No, you're fine. Trust me, when I make the YouTube video, I'm gonna say that you got wrecked.
Nah, it's not gonna. I did not get wrecked, but I loved having this conversation. I would love to do it again. But yeah. Anyway, have a good night.
Absolutely, man. You do the same. Wow. That was interesting. Oh my god. Okay. So I drank like 2 bottles of water, took some headache medicine. Fortunately, I threw up early in the bathroom, so I don't have to throw up later. I am 15, but I took some of a pot gummy and I'm nervous. Can I call in? Not anonymous. I don't know if you're in the mental capacity to call in. But okay, how about this? Tell me right now what you would like to talk about, and we'll see. Because we just spent a long time on that call. And technically, I had stuff I was going to cover today, but I'm fine with not covering it. Most of it was just looking at Tucker Carlson. So tell me what you want to talk about, and then we can, we'll see. I can't promise anything, though. Whew. Well, that was fun. Okay. In 1 second, guys. I'm gonna grab some water. Okay. Eileen, right, whatever you want to talk about is fine. We can talk about immigration or trans. Oh, okay. I'll give you a link. You can come on. You're at a now 29-minute limit. Got it? All right. Lucky I like talking with people. Let me find... Oh, it's like right here. There we go. Nope, that's not it. Maybe no, I'm not gonna put the Discord link in the description. I don't want a million people being able to enter this.
Hey.
Hello.
Am I on?
You are on.
Yeah, I'm really nervous. I'm gonna be out of my mind in a couple minutes.
You are totally fine. I do this for entertainment, so hopefully this is entertainment. What's your name, so I don't have to call you Panda Man?
Listen, I'm 15. I don't really want to tell my name.
All right, can I call you Greg then?
You can call me. My first name is Kirk. You can call me Kirk, but I don't want to tell you my last name.
That is totally fine. Not everyone puts their first and last name on the internet. Stupidly like me.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm really nervous.
You're totally fine, man. This is like the second call I've ever done. So trust me, you are.
No, it's not. I've called into multiple Twitch channels. I've done some debates with some lefties, and
cool.
You know, I think I'm not nervous about that. I'm just nervous about my physical effects because edibles are like very strong compared to smoking weed, and the only thing that's accessible is edibles because my grandma takes them because she has Alzheimer's, so I can't smoke weed.
So you're stealing your grandmother's gummies, is what you're telling me?
Well, it's not stealing because she lets.
Oh, is that the excuse we're going with? Well, you know, as long as she's letting you, then I guess we'll allow it.
Okay, yeah. So I threw up, and I hope I keep my sanity.
I'm rooting for you, man.
So I know usually leftists want to give their pronouns, or what if you don't have to. So what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about Trump? You want to talk about immigration, the economy? We can talk, or you can talk about a social issue.
So I just talked to him about, like, I feel like every other issue. Let's talk about Trump. Let's talk about some electoral stuff, because that was the one thing we didn't really talk about, me and
even though I'm a Republican,
guy.
I'm not really a Trump guy. I'm a
Mhm.
DeSantis guy personally.
A DeSantis guy. I found one in the wild. There's not a lot of you guys, are there? So how do you feel? So, question: how do you feel about the animosity between kind of the Trump wing and the DeSantis wing?
I mean, I'm not like hardcore either side. I'm gonna vote down. Well, I'm 15, so I can't vote. But if I could, I would vote down the line Republican for whoever the candidate is, as long as they're not a neo-Nazi. So basically, if anyone who's got an R next to their name. At the end of the day, when it comes to Trump, though, I mean, he's a very toxic brand. He denied the legitimacy of a democratic election. He's tried to numerous times try to install cronies. He's blatantly incompetent. He doesn't have a coherent policy agenda, and he's definitely has said very divisive and polarizing statements, including on the issue of race. So as a whole, I think that Trump brand is, even though I like some of his policies, like the Abraham Accords and strengthening our relationship with Israel and trying to be tough on China and Russia. And even though I like some of that and cutting taxes and deregulating, even though I like some of his conservative policies, he didn't really have a coherent message in 2016. And even during his administration, where I liked some of his policies, at the end, and the First Step Act, which I also liked, even though I liked some of his policies, and we can get into those specific policies if you have a disagreement, but as a brand, Trump has just not been good. The fact that he said that he thinks 2020 was stolen is not good or healthy for a democratic process. And as a whole, I just think that DeSantis can embrace better aspects of Trump that I like, at least in terms of having kept his state open and relatively free in terms of the economy, as well as not being big, as well as like managing to troll the woke or whatever. But I don't really like to talk about the culture war because it's kind of mind numbing. But at the end of the day, I just like some of DeSantis's policies, especially on the economy, and as well as not having as much violent crime. But in terms of like a pure political branding standpoint, I think Trump is toxic. I don't know if he's racist, but he's definitely said very polarizing things. And as a whole, I don't think that we're going to be a healthy party if we are married at the hip.
So, from what I understand, it seems like you're really looking at this from like a purely what's the word? Marketing standpoint to a degree, and kind of the electoral end of it. So, considering you are a more of a DeSantis guy, and you seem to kind of be a little bit not as interested in the culture war. I have to say, all my life, so you mentioned you're 15. I'm about double your age. I'm 30. What I've noticed throughout my entire life is the right wing has generally leaned very heavily onto the culture war to win elections. Only now. Go ahead.
Well, when it comes specifically to my positions, like I don't like again, I'm pro-life. I think abortion is not good. I'm pro-life. I'm completely anti-abortion. I'm not.
So why do you think that? I'm curious. What's the impetus behind that?
Do you mean my pro-life stance?
Yeah.
Well, I believe that since all life begins at conception, even though you do get into some issues with bodily autonomy, at the end of the day, my personal, political, or moral position is that if life begins at conception, I don't see why someone at 1 day old is fundamentally different from someone at 1 month old or 1 year old, at least in terms of standpoint of rights. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
Right.
And there are people who disagree, and that's fine. I don't think that everyone who likes abortion is a baby murder or anything like that, but then my position is if we agree that life, at least outside the womb, has rights independent of some other third party who wants to violate them, and we agree that happens throughout their entire life, I don't see why getting in that 1 second out of the womb is what changes your rights standpoint. I also don't know where you draw an arbitrary line other than the beginning. Now you can argue that it's a bodily autonomy issue, especially before whatever viability, and that's a very fair standpoint. Again, I don't nag people who are against or for abortion rights, but at the end of the day, that's just my position. Now, is this a position a lot of people hold? Yes. Is this a position most people hold? No. So at the end of the day, I just want a culture where we value life in general, and that's just my opinion. But I think at the end of the day, the pro-life movement is going to have to work from the bottom up mostly at the state and local level, and not top down from the federal level. So I just think it's more reinforcing the idea that this is life and this has value, at least from standpoint. And I don't fault people who have had abortions. I just personally still do think you're terminating a life, and that should be not legal.
Sure. So you mentioned life beginning at conception. I would kind of have to push back against a little bit of that. Just to kind of give a little bit of my background really quick. I am the child of a illegitimate relationship. I live in America because my mother was not able to keep me in the country where I was born. I was originally born in Paraguay. And then I was adopted to America. I'm a big proponent of adoption. I think when it comes to child rearing and childbirth and kind of the abortion conversation, I do think adoption kind of needs to be part of that conversation. But I also do think that conception is a pretty low bar, I think, to set for people getting pregnant. Well, most women don't know that they're pregnant until, maybe around 6 to 7 weeks. It really kind of depends on their cycle and when they end up getting pregnant. How do you feel about, because I kind of go by the understanding that until a fetus is viable outside the womb, which happens usually somewhere around, I want to say 23 weeks. I could be wrong about the exact week date on that. I think abortions are perfectly reasonable. Those fetuses are still necessarily dependent on the mother's life. And if birth would not be able to, at that moment, would not be able to actually live. So I feel like although the line is always going to be arbitrary, I do feel like that's a pretty reasonable bar. Do you think like the Republican Party needs to start moving a little bit more towards the pro choice direction at all?
I definitely no, I don't. I'm not pro-choice. But can I explain why I disagree with your position?
I only really asked that because you seemed rather understanding that your view was anti
pro-choice. I'm just saying, like, I understand from a cultural perspective, as in like compassion. But it's not like I don't sympathize with abortion rights. I'm saying I understand why people get abortion, even though I disagree with it. So it's not that I want Republicans to become pro-choice. I'm just saying, like, I understand why someone would be pro-choice, even though I disagree with it.
Right. I mean more from a political standpoint, if you think that like Republicans need to head in that direction a little bit more.
So let me read you the definition of conception real quick.
By all means.
So, okay, let me pull it up real quick so I can read it.
I understand what the word concept means. So conception, I'm assuming, is going to be a little bit based on that, but that's root word stuff.
I mean, it's called, what do you call it? Preparations. It's noun. Inception of pregnancy. Conceiving, fertilizing, impregnation, insemination. The time between a product's conception and launching. Inception, genesis, or... So it seems basically conception's just basically a synonym for origin, genesis, beginning, whatever. So
right. The theoretical creation of something.
By definition, if a life is conceived, it would have to be the origin of that life, meaning the life would have to be created. By definition, assuming that we use that definition of conception.
Right.
Now you can say, so do you deny life begins at conception?
I'm sorry. Say that again. One more time.
I'm saying. Well, if you're saying you don't believe life begins at conception, I mean, from a purely definitional standpoint, I don't get that.
I don't know if I would say life begins at that. I think where we draw the line of where the state needs to define life should probably be a little bit farther down the road.
I'm saying the definition of what life is. I just gave you a definition of conception. So I'm saying mine is definitionally correct. Not morally or in terms of what life. I'm not saying it's a worthy life or life we should ban because there's an argument for abortion, even if that is life, but do you not deny that it is a life, just given that definition?
Given that definition, I would probably have to concede that is technically life. I would also bristle at that because I don't think that really describes what life is. Only really because, like, if during conception, at the moment of conception, right, that person, if we're stipulating that is a person, I wouldn't make the argument that person is living, that fetus, that being has the capability of living a life. Like when I think of life, and I think what a lot of people, I believe also in the Bible, they mention some of this, where like life really doesn't begin until your airways open up, until you breathe. That's most likely an understanding, a rudimentary understanding of when the Bible was written, of how like kids are born. That's most likely where that comes from. But I do think there's a certain aspect of life where you need to be living, not simply existing. I don't know if I think I'd bristle a little bit at the idea of life just meaning you exist now, or even you conceptually exist, since we know that like stillborn kids can be born, and also there's what's the miscarriages. So life beginning at conception isn't.
Miscarriages are not abortion. Miscarriages are accidental. Abortion is intentional. So there's
Right.
a difference there.
Yeah.
Now, can I
ahead.
get to that?
Yeah, by all means.
So that
By all
is an
means.
interesting argument. Now, when I wasn't trying to get you a gotcha. I just wanted
No,
to
you're
know
fine.
what you said you didn't believe life begins at conception. I was trying to make a more of a definitional argument. Now, from a moral
Right.
argument,
Yeah. Definitionally,
I don't
it's.
think that life beginning at conception, by definition, necessarily even means that abortion is wrong, at least just on its own, because not all life is worthy of life. Now, specifically when it comes to the idea of living, I don't really know where you draw that line to not include fetuses who are equally incapable of independent thought, or fetuses, or even young babies, or even 7-year-olds. Like,
I mean, babies
this
are
line-
capable of independent thought.
No, they're not. At least not.
They're not.
Not really. They're required their mother to breastfeed them. They're required to be held around. They
Well,
can't move on
that's
their
not the same thing as independent thought, though. Babies have thoughts. Most of them are like stupid, but like
Yeah, but
they
I'm
have
saying
thoughts. They have
they're already-
motivations.
okay,
They have
my
desires.
point
They have
is,
wants. They have
argument is
the things they dislike.
well,
Mm.
can I get to my point and then you can respond?
Yeah, by all means. By all means.
Okay, so if your argument is about the difference between living and life, or the difference that maybe it's technically classified as life from a purely definitional standpoint, but it's not really living, well, I don't see anything which makes independent thought in and of itself, if you can't take action, any different than that in terms of living. If I would define living, assuming you're not going to include it just by what life is, I would say that's probably independent life plus the ability to act on decisions and make independent decisions, of which I wouldn't say you even get that ability until you're at least like 5 or 6. So I think, but again, I think these are all arbitrary lines. My opinion is I don't want us to draw some line. This is when you're, even though you're a genetically independent human being, this is when the characteristics are valuable enough for when a state will protect your rights. I think that if you get in that business, then I just don't like that. I think that if you are a conceptual life who has the ability to develop and gain rights later on, I don't want to be able to kill you at a young age. Same reason I wouldn't want to be aborted. I don't want these people to be aborted, or these fetuses, or this life, or whatever term. Even if you don't think it's life, they're going to develop into it. So I don't want to abort them for the same reason I wouldn't want to be aborted. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to, I just think that we shouldn't. The only objective line is the anti-abortion line, or pro-life line. But again, if we're just going to concede that this is an example of rights competing between parent and child, then at the end of the day, it's kind of going to be subjective at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know a lot of people don't really like talking about abortion because it's kind of a
I don't, especially not when I'm stoned.
That's fair. No, it's one of these things. It's a topic that I think people kind of have these unmovable I think unmovable positions on, because there's not really a lot I could say that would make you suddenly not believe that that the bundle of cells in a woman's womb is not a life, because to you, you're thinking, hey, that has the possibility of life. If unabated, that would be a life. As far as I'm concerned, that is a life. The thing that I think that I really get hung up with when it comes to the abortion debate mostly comes down to a lot of bodily autonomy, which you've addressed already. And also, I think the state's ability to impose I don't even know if lifestyle would be the word to use in this case, but the ability, the allowing the government to kind of tie these women to child rearing against their will. At the end of the day, the line will always be arbitrary. That's kind of something that I think we can't escape. And it's why I tend to lean more towards the pro-choice movement than the pro-life movement. Only because the pro-choice movement allows somebody to live within the pro-life space as much as they would like to choose to live within it. It's really, for me, more of a freedom thing and less of a strong personal belief in abortion. I don't, it would be great if we didn't have the problems of like rape, incest, and all of these things, or just accidental abortions, but I think, or accidental pregnancies, I should say. But the line's always going to be arbitrary. I just, I lean towards the pro-choice opinion in general, because if you as a person believes that life already started, then you are well within your rights to do that. If I don't believe that, then I have the right to do that myself. This is always going to be an eternal debate, I think.
Can I get to that?
Sure, by all means.
Yeah, just so there are a couple things. So I agree with you. It's not really ever. You're not gonna meet me. I know I'm not gonna become pro-choice.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know what? That's fine, because that's what politics is. But my opinion is, at least on abortion, I think abortion is going to happen. But at the same time, even if there's a couple thousand abortions, and even if I think abortion is murder, there's how many real murders, or not real murders, there's how many other murders, which I would also classify as murder, but are also legally classified as murder here. So at the end of the day, my goal is just trying to reduce abortion. Now, you mentioned bodily autonomy and this and that, and the main flaw, I think, is so long as we agree that the one role of government is protecting rights, and so long as my definition of rights would include preborn people or preborn life or fetuses or whatever, so long as that happens, and that's gonna lead to an anti-abortion political position, even if, or a pro-life political position, even if you think that it's a bodily autonomy issue for parents, or that if someone doesn't want to be a parent, they shouldn't be forced into that lifestyle or whatever. Like, and men and women, they both don't want to be parents. Often men don't want to play child support. I think that's a sad thing. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to a conflict where, if you believe that the government should protect rights, and you believe that these unborn people are going to have rights, that's inherently going to create a conflict where you do want the government to regulate this out, like you would other externalities or other murders. And that's going to conflict with other, or it's going to, at least in perception, conflict with other people's bodily autonomy, and even others' financial and time autonomy, because it's not just, if you have a kid, then it's not just a bodily issue, but also, do you have to raise it, stuff like that. So
Right, yeah.
you get into complicated issues. The point is, if you think that the government should protect rights, and you believe that this has rights from a conceptual or legal philosophical point of view, then you're going to be pro-life at the end of the day. And that just, again, has to come down to the empirical question of, do you think this life's worth protecting? And so long as you think it is worth protecting, there's not a great libertarian case of letting them kill it, or if you still think it's murder, because now again, I think, again, the line is arbitrary to an extent, because but I think I don't really think the line is completely arbitrary, because the pro-life position does offer an objective definition, and that objective definition is based on when life begins. And I think that is an objective definition, whereas all pro-choice standards, be it out of the womb, which is kind of subjective, because what about all the time before the womb, or 9 months, or 8 months, or whatever time in the pregnancy? Well, what about the previous 8 or whatever months? Then that's still, my opinion is, the only, at least objectively, even if not objectively correct, the only objectively placed position, even if it's not correct, the only place you can objectively put the pro-life, the only objective place you can put for abortion would be the pro-life beginning at conception line, since that's the only time you can get it. At the end of the day, even if there are a couple thousand abortions, at the end, the goal is, it's going to happen, and same way murder happens. At the end of the day, I just hope to elect more pro-life politicians who will enact more regulations, install a culture of life where people are encouraged to go to church or have families and not have abortions. It's going to happen mostly at the state level, and mostly at the local level. And at the end of the day, when it comes to these abortion laws, that's all you can do it for now, because unfortunately we do live in a, or at least unfortunately in my opinion, we do live in a culture of abortion, at least in many states, and it depends also. So at the end of the day, I just think this is an issue of, you're right to an extent that there's going to be some issues of bodily autonomy, but those bodily autonomy issues have to be weighed in the fact that if you think this is life, you're going to want to protect that life legally. You have to understand that mindset of how a pro-life person thinks about this. And when it comes to the understanding of abortion, I don't fault people who have had abortion, that I don't think that they consciously thought it was murder, but I still think it's murder, so I still want to ban it. But I understand why they did it, because they did not consider that. At the end of the day, hope is trying to limit the option as much as possible so that never happens. But at the end of the day, that's going to take time, effort, and cultural change. And if that's the case, then all we have to say is agree to disagree. But so long as it's on the state level, we're just going to have to fight it in the state legislators.
So I'm curious, how do you feel about, I think it was Lindsey Graham who offered a bill to introduce a ban on abortion federally. Do you support that? Because that would create the world your, I think your ideal, world of banning abortion to a degree, but also I think you kind of recognize that that's not going to stop abortion. That's really mostly going to inhibit.
I do think it's going to stop abortion.
Mhm.
It's just not going to stop all abortions, since it's only 14 weeks. So, no, I support the law. Do I know if it was the best political timing? Maybe not. But either way, I still support the law. At least.
So you do support a federal ban then? You mentioned earlier you didn't, or that it should be left to the states.
No, I don't support a federal complete ban now. I would in the future.
Mhm.
In the ideal future, we'd pass a pro-life constitutional amendment. In the meanwhile, at the federal level, my goal is trying to pass as many regulations. But I'm saying, but even if there was a law to ban abortion federally, I'd be fine with that as a matter of legal or moral view. It's just, I don't know if it's practical. So this is just a practicality issue of
Right.
Of politics. I'm not concerned if they ban abortion federally. I would actually support that. It's just an issue of, is this politically practical? And I don't think a 14-week abortion ban, at least at the federal level, as long as it's 14 weeks, is that politically unpractical. But if it was politically unpractical, I might oppose it. At the end of the day, I don't think that most voters care at the federal level abortion. So even if there was a federal abortion ban, which I would support in theory, or I do support, even though I support it, I understand that that might not happen. So I'm just going to wait. But if there is any legislation, including a total ban or a 14-week ban, yes, I'm going to support it at the end of the day. I just understanding that.
Did you support Roe v. Wade? I'm assuming no.
No, obviously not.
So Roe v. Wade, in its literature, like, there was restrictions on abortion. I believe it was somewhere in the 20-week range.
Well, so there was not restrictions on abortion. What Roe v. Wade did was, it was I believe it was 14th Amendment. Now, even most pro-choice legal scholars, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, said that it was not really good law. It's just
right, because it was based more on a privacy law.
Well, they said it wasn't really based on anything specific, or even that they thought was in the Constitution. Like, even many pro-choice legal scholars have said it's good federal law, but bad federal law, or it's good policy, bad law.
Right.
As a matter of law.
Right. It wasn't. Yeah. Yeah. It should have been a law passed instead of a Supreme Court decision.
Again, I hold the conception line personally, so obviously I oppose Roe v. Wade, and that also struck down many at the time.
Well, I understand that you hold the conception law, but from a practicality standpoint, would you, during Roe v. Wade's 50-year run, there were restrictions on abortion after a point. You could not abort a fetus after a certain number of weeks. I don't know the exact number of weeks, but
so most abortions happen really early either way. So
right.
I just wanted to.
Right. Yeah.
And before Roe v. Wade even happened, there were like 30 states would have conception or near conception laws. So as a whole, no, Roe v. Wade was terrible.
Well, most of those. So I know you're aware that most abortions happen in the early trimesters. Then you should already know that most abortions, late-term abortions, are due to extenuating circumstances such as viability of the fetus and the health of the mother. Yeah.
Well, specifically when it comes to health or viability of the fetus. So again, I thought after second trimester is when you become viable. That's not what are you talking about?
Say again. I'm sorry.
No, when you, I thought after a certain while you get viable, and that's actually where you're supposed to. What do you mean by viability? You mean like the baby couldn't survive or health of the baby?
Yeah, so sometimes happens with like stillbirths, or if their air passages don't open up. Now, because we live in a modern society, there are ways that doctors can like manually open children's like airways. I know I had a manager who her son popped out. I want to say like 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half early. And he had to be put on a ventilator for the first, I think first couple of weeks or so. Mostly healthy child, but like stuff like that does happen. And sometimes, unfortunately, you're far along into a pregnancy, and extenuating circumstances kind of force you to, do what most parents think is impossible, which I don't blame them. It royally sucks. And I worry that, and the thing is, like, the reason why I oppose the pro-life stance is I worry that there's not this this thought put into this, that a complete ban on abortion would leave people with these circumstances with no ability to seek healthcare. And that's been a lot of the left's problem with the pro-life movement, is as much as, we can disagree about the arbitrary of where we draw the line. At the end of the day, people need healthcare, and we can't write laws that are too restrictive to the point that we're not catching people in these extenuating circumstances, which I say are extenuating and rare. But when you extrapolate even 1% of the population of all Americans, you're talking about millions of people. So that's.
Can I get to that?
By all means.
So I don't know what specific attenuating circumstance you're talking about. If you're talking specifically about cases where the child's health is potentially at risk,
yes,
I don't really know how you deal with that in terms of that, but I think that's a case-by-case basis.
But that would be an abortion. Like that's what that is, though. Yeah.
Even if, but let's say theoretically there's a possibility that the baby lives, or even if it's rare, I would err on the side of caution, waiting until that it can develop, so that way we can test it. So
unfortunately, that does happen sometimes. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for like 2 seconds. That does happen. Well, doctors will insist in some states that have stricter abortion bans. Some doctors will tell women that they have to wait until the absolute last moment, and some women end up dying because of that.
Yeah, again,
waiting on medical care is never healthy or safe for anybody, fetus or mother.
I don't know how you do that. Again, it might be a case-by-case basis, but not really, because again, you should err on the side of caution. If there's death, or literally no state has done it where they would die, so you can get an exception for extreme examples of life. Is a way to preserve life. That doesn't really happen. But if you stipulate abortion is murder, at the end of the day, if 99% of abortions, or whatever the actual stats are, which are actually very close to that, are for non-medical reasons, even if they're for financial reasons, if they're for non-medical reasons, then you're still allowing 99% of murders. So 1% of potentially, if you don't even know if it is justified, cases of maybe healthcare, to the extent that it does happen, which I don't even know what specific circumstance you're talking about. And if you think an abortion is murder, then at the end they're still letting millions of murders happen because of like a fraction percent, because the overwhelming majority of abortions are either non-financial or not or either financial abortions, or abortions even for psychological, not physical health of the mother. So that's not really at all a good argument, in my opinion. I think that
it's just a simple abortion ban that would be too restrictive, wouldn't catch these people. That's the concern, really.
Again, like, if you think abortion is murder, then as a whole, I don't think that's a main practical concern.
Well, yeah, but if two people are gonna die versus one, and one person's already like 40 and the other person is 0 years old, I think that's while it's a difficult decision, I think that's a pretty easy calculus to make.
It's a difficult decision, but at the end, I'm saying the overwhelming majority of abortions aren't like that. So it's a red herring for the abortion rate as whole.
Yeah, I mean, a red herring that affects millions of people, though. Again, I like if
I can show you the overwhelming majority of abortions are for financial reasons.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm not
Well,
arguing
then,
that it's
okay,
not a
no.
minority.
So
I'm arguing that
if your
by
argument is
the
abortion
raw
should be
number that
legal,
it's a lot of people.
no, I'm saying if you're saying abortion should be legal and you stipulate abortion is murder, but you only let it because of this 1%, you're saying allow who knows how tens of 15s or to 100 million over at least the course of American history, people to die because of maybe one who knows how many million, but definitely not nearly 100 million, or who knows how many have died from abortion, because who for like very rare medical circumstances. So I'm saying as a proportion, if you believe abortion is murder, these one-off cases or extenuating circumstances just aren't a good argument.
So, question: if a mother's having complication with her abortion, so unfortunately, we're 4 minutes past the time. I have only one question for you, and this is gonna be my big question. If a mother's having a complication with her pregnancy and a doctor recommends her to get an abortion, if you stipulate that would be murder, the mother would still have the ability to bring another life into the world, correct? Would you not defend the ability for that mother to attempt to bring in another life?
I forgot.
At least from a life-saving perspective. Because if you have a mother that's having a complication with her abortion or with her pregnancy and she needs to get an abortion, while you would stipulate that is murder, and while I don't think anybody, you, me, or the person having to go through that process is a fan of that, I certainly think that it would be better, instead of punishing that woman, than to let her have the ability to get that procedure done, and then she can go get pregnant again in like a year or whatever. Her and her husband can get right back to the work of pumping out babies.
Okay, but I'm saying there are many other cases of abortion. So again, this is just I'm not letting all abortions happen because of that case.
Okay.
Like, no. Like, if you're saying that I should let millions of abortions happen because of one-off difficult circumstances, like, I just don't think from a proportional perspective.
Do you kind of look at it like the trolley problem, where it's like I got millions over here and like 10 million over here? Is it kind of like that's how you're thinking about it?
In terms of amount of people aborted, it's been like hundreds of millions since Roe v. Wade, at least.
Right.
And for medical complications, again, these are maybe less than 1%. So no, it's not a trolley problem. It's a complete overwhelming one side and a very tiny difficult to do with a minority. So from purely that doesn't make really much sense, in my opinion. But listen, when it comes to those cases, I don't think abortion should be legal. If that there's a possibility that fetus can develop healthily, I think you should err on the side of caution and wait later. At the end of the day, I understand it's a difficult decision, but I'm not going to let all abortions happen because of that. So we're just going to have to say it's a complicated issue, but we're going to have to agree to disagree and find out in the legislators. But
I was going to say, yeah, we'll find out in the elections. So. Okay. You'll have your DeSantis running. I have no idea who's going to be running on the Democratic side, since God help me if Joe Biden ends up running, and I don't even know what I'm going to do if Kamala runs. So either way, yeah.
Biden does better with black voters than Kamala.
Dude, Biden. I'll give him this. Biden is a fucking aberration. I don't understand what his voting block is. But anyway, like I said, you had a 29-minute timer and you went a little bit longer, which I'm happy you did. I really appreciate you coming on, Kirk. Pop in whenever you want, by all means. I've really liked talking to you.
Are you finished with your stream?
Yeah, it's like 11 o'clock for me, and I got to get to bed, and I got work tomorrow. So
okay, bye.
You have a nice night. Goodbye.
You too.
How'd the call go? Why are you asking me this? Don't show me this again. It went great. Just go away, Discord. Okay. Wow. 2 back-to-back calls. Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We have gone over none of what I had planned today, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Also, I do have a hard offline time. So, yeah. to anybody who was watching, anybody who was lurking, anybody who wants to come on next time, have a little chit chat. Always open, love talking with people. I just like talking with people. But either way, you've been great. I'm now, it's now late for me and I'm a bit tired. So I'm going to head off. You all have a wonderful night. And I will see you possibly Thursday afternoon. I'm not guaranteeing anything because it's Thanksgiving. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have the time to stream. So we'll see. But for now, bye-bye. I know. I should have hit the button right when I did that, but I didn't have it loaded up, okay?